Chapter 574. Yu Huai, the son of Yu Mu, ranked 7th among the second-generation disciples of Yu clan and Yu Mu's father. At first glance, Wu Qi felt that this man was an evil ghost who had crawled out of the hell. There was no human touch in him at all. Yu Huai's skeleton was still very tall and burly, standing about 9 feet tall. If he had a little bit of flesh and blood on his body, he would be a burly man as well. However, it was unknown what kind of evil secret technique he was cultivating. Apart from the thin layer of human skin that covered his entire body, all the flesh and blood on his body had already fused with his bones. His entire body was a pale golden skeleton. Numerous thumb-sized blood vessels could be seen wriggling on this pale golden skeleton, dark green and wriggling from time to time like tiny snakes. There was a liquid glinting with a strong black light flowing in these blood vessels, and in his empty chest, a heart that glowed with a bronze metallic luster and looked like it was forged of metal was beating vigorously. Every time his heart beat, a faint rumble would ring out like a bronze bell, and the liquid in his blood vessels would suddenly shake and produce a deep, muffled sound of metal clashing. Despite his appearance, Yu Huai's long black robe was only draped over his back, exposing a large part of his body. Wu Qi could see his skeleton, the tangled blood vessels, and the faint black smoke that sprayed out of his bones and joints from time to time. The black smoke was extremely sticky, and it sprayed out of his joints like glue, slowly forming one ghost face after another in the air before gradually melting away. Looking at Yu Huai's dignified appearance for a long while, Wu Qi cupped his fist and said, "I'm Tan Lang, the 100-men lieutenant of the military court of Anhe City." Yu Huai frowned faintly on his shriveled face as he said in a deep voice, "A mere 100-men lieutenant? Tiske, Yu Miao, it's all my fault for holding you back. If you could leave the clan a few years earlier and become the great oracle of the Directorate of Celestials in another province, perhaps you would be able to recruit more formidable helpers." Yu Huai sighed, then shook his head and said, "The few who are most likely to compete with you have served as the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials for several years. Many of the helpers they brought this time have broken through the realm of the First Panga Heaven and the Six Stars realm of the First Panga Heaven. They are all 1,000-men lieutenants in those counties." Yu Huai heaved a deep sigh and shook his head at Wu Qi. Wu Qi smiled faintly. He raised his left hand and gently shook the black beads on his wrist. Yu Huai narrowed his eyes and said with a deep laugh, "Oh? The black evil primordial spirit bead is in your hands? Did you hide your cultivation? No wonder I couldn't see through it." With a faint smile, Yu Huai pointed at his chest and said, "Come, throw a punch at me with all your might. Let me see your strength, boy." Wu Qi paused and looked at Yu Miao. Yu Miao looked hesitantly at Yu Huai. "Are you afraid that this boy will hurt me?" Yu Huai snapped in a deep voice, displeased. "A punch with all your might has given me some confidence. If this boy's strength is not good enough, he'd better not embarrass himself." Gritting his teeth, Yu Miao said to Wu Qi in a low voice, "In that case, throw a punch with all your might." "A punch with all my might?" Wu Qi nodded, shook his fist, and suddenly took a deep breath. Suddenly, the cold and gloomy air in the hall began to stir. Wu Qi had nearly sucked in all the air in the hall with just a single breath. The ground trembled slightly, and a few underground energy veins rippled faintly, emitting a large amount of purple mist that rushed out and poured into Wu Qi's body. With the black evil primordial spirit bead shielding his aura, nothing unusual could be seen on Wu Qi's body. But his right arm suddenly grew thicker, and blood vessels popped out from under his skin. They looked like they were made of the finest purple gold, emitting a dazzling golden light and purple mist. Wu Qi spread his right palm, then clenched it into a fist again. As he did so, his right palm doubled in size, and muffled cracking noises could be heard coming from the clenched fist. The color of his right fist had changed, making it look like a metal fist made of purple gold. Yu Huai's face twitched violently. He gritted his teeth and cursed under his breath. He wanted to stop Wu Qi, but he could not bring himself to do so. Glaring angrily at Yu Mu, he suddenly waved his right hand and pointed out 49 runes in a row to strengthen himself. A faint ring of black light enveloped Yu Huai's eccentric body. Shrill ghost howls kept coming out of his body, and a chilly wind was vaguely spreading out from his bones. The chilly wind in the hall was suddenly several times stronger than before. Silently, Wu Qi exercised the true body of heaven and earth scripture and focused all his strength on his right fist. Not only that, he also used the celestial fiend battle the heaven script he learned from his celestial fiend puppets to condense the strength in his body into an explosive energy, which he gradually compressed in his fist. All he needed to do was to teach Yu Huai a good lesson. Since you want me to punch with all my might for the sake of my future status and interests, I can't let you underestimate me. When everything was ready, Wu Qi laughed wildly. Suddenly, his body swayed, and he exercised the Kuafu chasing the sun step, bringing him in front of Yu Huai. Kuafu chasing the sun step? Yu Huai could not help but exclaim as he watched Wu Qi come directly in front of him. Good lad. Yu Huai's bronze heart began to beat violently, and the blood vessels that entangled in his skeleton wriggled violently. Clattering sounds of metal clashing rang out around him. A large amount of black smoke sprayed out of his joints, which quickly transformed into a black armor on his body. The armor wrapped him up tightly, with ferocious ghost heads bearing their teeth poking out from his shoulders, chest, and all the important joints of his body. The entire armor was filled with a threatening evil aura. Borrowing the momentum of the Kuafu chasing the sun step, Wu Qi exerted all his strength and smashed his fist into Yu Huai's chest. His fist shook violently 9 times, and with each shake, he shattered a layer of protective black light on the surface of Yu Huai's body and forced him to take a step back. After the 9th shake, the protective barrier formed by 49 runes shattered, and the explosive energy condensed in Wu Qi's fist shot out whistling into Yu Huai's body. A loud boom rang out, and a blinding light burst out from every corner of the hall. Countless restrictive barriers emerged out of thin air and shielded the hall tightly. Yu Huai grunted and was thrown backward. With one punch from Wu Qi, he flew tens of miles away and slammed his head into the restrictive barrier at the end of the hall. Only then did he manage to stop himself. Yu Huai was slammed against the barrier by the tremendous force of the punch, and dazzling electric arcs kept bursting out of his body. His body nearly shattered the restrictive barrier at the end of the hall, and he was nearly knocked out of the hall by Wu Qi's punch. The blinding light flickered for the time it took to finish a pot of tea before it stopped. Only then did Yu Huai slowly slip to the ground, staggered a few steps forward, and finally found his footing. He stood stiffly where he was, and only after a quarter of an hour did he slowly straighten his body. When he straightened his back, Wu Qi and Yu Miao could clearly hear the creaking noise coming from his spine. It was a full quarter of an hour later that Yu Huai retracted his black armor and walked slowly to Wu Qi and Yu Miao as if nothing had happened. His face twitched as he nodded approvingly at Wu Qi and said, "What a powerful punch. You've broken through the 7 stars realm of the first heaven of Pangu, haven't you? What a powerful punch indeed. With your help, Yu Miao will be able to take this province for sure." He reached out a hand and patted Wu Qi on the shoulder, then said in a deep voice, "Help Yu Miao wholeheartedly, and I won't mistreat you." Turning to look at Yu Mu, Yu Huai said in a deep voice, "It has been decided in the clan this time. I've been appointed as the prefecture overseer of a 3rd-grade province, and I've even surpassed a few elders. That's why everyone is jealous of me." Apart from those 7 brothers who have a province in their hands, the rest of your brothers will certainly put their attention on you in the competition for the 9th-grade prefecture overseer. Just by looking at how someone dared to attack you at the gate, we can already see the reason behind it. Yu Huai closed his eyes and said coldly, "Since they want to do this, let's just kill them all. Tanlang, just kill them all. Kill all the helpers recruited by Yu Miao's brothers. We don't care about life and death in this assembly." Wu Qi glanced at Yu Huai, who looked as if nothing had happened, then cupped his fist and said respectfully, "In that case, let's kill them all." They were nothing more than the hanger-ons recruited by Yu Miao's brothers, and Wu Qi did not feel any psychological burden at all if they were killed. The world of immortal cultivators was just like that. For the sake of resources and a glimmer of future, which of them did not kill with their hands stained with blood? Yu Huai nodded with satisfaction, then turned to Yu He and said with a smile, "With Tan Lang's help, you have 100% chance of winning." It's almost time for you two to leave now. I'm at a critical juncture in refining these 108 fiend corpses, so I can't attend the assembly. Yu Mu bowed to Yu Huai, and Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed to Yu Huai as well. After that, both of them quickly left the Great Hall. Even though Yu Miao was Yu Huai's only son, he was very afraid of the hall, and did not like the gloomy and evil aura in it. After Wu Qi and Yu Miao left the hall, Yu Huai, who had been acting as if nothing had happened, suddenly sat down on the ground, opened his mouth, and sprayed a mouthful of black liquid about 10 feet away. Damn it! Where did this boy come from? He must have broken through the 7 stars realm of the first Panga heaven, and Lao Tzu's cultivation base is only at this level. How could he be so stupid as to let him punch Lao Tzu with all his might? Damn it, my vitality is severely damaged, and I'll have to recuperate for months. Flustered and exasperated, Yu Huai murmured a few curses under his breath, then roared, "Somebody, bring me the family members of that audacious and lawless thief. Lao Tzu will teach them a good lesson." As Yu Huai's roar echoed out, the crisp sound of a jade bell suddenly rang out over the mansion. As the bell rang, more than 100 descendants of the 3rd generation of the Yu clan in Zhong province marched out from all over the mansion like a tide, gathering toward the main hall in the middle of the mansion. Together with the 200 oracles, Wu Qi and Yu Miao also followed the crowd into the main hall. Under the command of dozens of seniors of the Yu clan, they marched into the hall in an orderly manner. Chapter 575. The main hall in the center of Yu clan's mansion was an eye-opener for Wu Qi. Unlike the other palaces in Yu, this hall had a very strange design. It was built with huge black stones that looked like a horned bull's head, with 8 sharp eaves pointing high into the air. It was surrounded by a circle of 360 huge stone pillars, each of which was carved with countless patterns of ghosts and deities. Of course, there was also a brazier on top of each stone pillar, from which a greenish flame towered tens of feet into the air. In each eave of the hall was a tower, in which feather men were on duty. Over 100 longbow men were lined up in a row before the main entrance of the hall. Each of them was clad in a suit of pure gold armor, their bodies gleaming with a golden gleam and looking mighty. There were also several thousand private soldiers patrolling around, all clad in heavy armors and emanating an oppressive and murderous aura with their rumbling footsteps. Wu Qi gave these longbow men and the soldiers a glance. Each of them had a cultivation base of at least heaven immortals, and they were all elites. In the past, Yu clan of Zhong province could not be ranked in the top 5 clans in Zhong province. Although it was still a powerful clan, it was not as imposing as it was today. However, Yu Mu had betrayed Feng Lingling decisively. After that, Zhong province was purged, and Yu clan had gained tremendous political and economic benefits. Now, Yu clan was vaguely the #1 clan under the new prefecture overseer of Zhong province, Bo Zhongfu. Therefore, whether it was the architecture or the private army, everything was very different from before. Taking the 360 stone pillars outside the hall as an example, each of them had to burn 150 kilograms of sesame oil extracted from the bodies of mermen and whales every day. In the past, Yu clan did not have the resources to erect 360 stone pillars outside their own hall, and usually, they would only light up 12 stone pillars for the occasion. But now, with all 360 stone pillars burning fiercely, the aroma of sesame oil wafted across half of Zhongning City, and an aura of wealth and honor was rising spontaneously. Led by a group of elders of Yu clan, Wu Qi and his company walked into the main hall of Yu clan. From the outside, this hall was only 1,000 feet long and wide. However, just like Yu Huai's Great Hall, this Great Hall of Yu clan was also equipped with an extremely profound restrictive spell. The Great Hall measured 100 miles in circumference, and was built with high walls and low in the middle. Seats were arranged in the shape of stairs, and there was only a flat area in the middle that measured 50 miles in both width and length. Dozens of seats were floating above the flat area. On the walls of the hall, there were countless giant stone sculptures carved with an extremely simple and unadorned technique. Wu Qi's primal chaos divine eyes scanned through these stone sculptures. They should be sculptures that sang the praises of the ancestors of the Yu family. There were scenes of fighting evil dragons, attacking ghosts and deities, shattering meteors, and harvesting various spiritual items from stars. A few of them aroused Wu Qi's interest. Judging from the patterns, it seemed that many human beings had joined hands with immortals to fight against some enemies hiding in the smoke. However, he had no idea when the battle was recorded. A large number of stone torches poked out of the crevices of the stone sculptures, burning fiercely with turquoise flames. The oil used was the same as those on the stone pillars outside, a mixture of the oil of mermen and precious spices extracted from the bodies of whales. The great hall was brightly lit and filled with a fragrant aroma. Everyone's faces were shrouded in a layer of pale green light, which added a mysterious air to the atmosphere. The great hall was large enough to accommodate hundreds of thousands of people. The 100 or so sons of Yu clan who were of the same generation as Yu Miao had brought hundreds of subordinates into the hall, but their numbers were only tens of thousands of people. They took their seats on the seats around the great hall, which still looked empty. Wu Qi glanced at the sons of Yu clan around him. Every single one of them was standing far away from the brothers next to them. It was obvious that they were estranged from each other. In the competition for the power of 16 ninth-grade provinces, all the sons of Yu clan were competitors. Naturally, they would not show any intimacy. That was how the sons of the great clans were. The so-called family and friendship were not worth mentioning in the face of great interests. Sitting next to Yu Miao, Wu Qi felt countless eyes glancing at him. But with the dark evil divine bead hiding his aura, Wu Qi looked like an ordinary human warrior. Those eyes glanced at him casually, and no one paid him any more attention. Exercising his chaotic divine eyes, Wu Qi saw all the people who were competing with Yu Miao in the Great Hall. No wonder Yu Miao said that there were 7 brothers whom he could not defeat and dared not to compete with. There were 7 young men who looked a dozen years older than Yu Miao, with 6 to 7 crescent moons embroidered on their sleeves. Clearly, their overall strength was far stronger than Yu Miao and his brothers. Many of the subordinates sitting next to these young men also had crescent moons embroidered on their sleeves. Compared with the 200 star-grade oracles under Yu Miao, their overall strength was far weaker. No wonder Yu Miao dared not to compete with them. Most of the other 100 or so sons of Yu clan had weaker cultivation base and subordinates than Yu Miao, but there were a dozen of them who were as strong as him, and among those subordinates, a few of them had crescent moons embroidered on their sleeves. Wu Qi nodded to himself. It seemed that if Yu Miao had not found him as a helper, it would have been very difficult for him to stand out and compete for the power of a 9th-grade province. When all the sons of Yu clan had taken their seats, the door of the great hall was slammed shut. A gust of chilly wind swept out from the ground, and the dozens of stone chairs floating in the middle of the hall were suddenly filled with people. Sitting on the chairs in the middle were the Grand Oracle of Zhong Province, Yu Miao, the Left Minister, and the other elders of Yu clan. At the moment, these elders were beaming with joy, and it was obvious that they were in a very good mood. Glancing at the sons of Yu clan around him, Yu Miao slowly raised his right hand. The great hall fell into a dead silence, and no one dared to speak again. Nodding contentedly, Yu Miao said slowly, "Today's assembly is a joyous occasion for Yu clan in Zhong province. Let's cut to the chase. Right now, the prefecture overseer of the 30 great prefectures is in the hands of my Yu family. Other than the 14 prefectures, which will be distributed among you elders, the 16 ninth-grade prefectures will be chosen today." Clearing his throat, Yu Miao said complacently, "The prefecture overseer of a province is an important position, so Yu clan must select the most elite sons to fill it. The first step is to test your cultivation base, and the strongest 48 sons will have the right to compete for the power of prefecture overseer." Upon hearing that, Yu Miao and the other sons of Yu clan glanced around, glancing at their brothers to see who might be their competitors. Only the 7 strongest sons of Yu clan remained motionless. For them, the power of prefecture overseer was secure, and the other brothers could not pose any threat to them. Yu Miao nodded and said in a deep voice, "One's cultivation base does not mean everything. To be a good prefecture overseer, apart from one's own cultivation base, one's ability to judge and use people is also very important. Therefore, the second step is to have the subordinates of the 48 chosen fight it out. There are no rules, no restrictions, and regardless of life or death. In the end, the 16 men whose subordinates remain on the field will be able to take over the position of prefecture overseer. As soon as Yu Miao's voice faded away, Yu Miao added, "The right of selection will be decided according to the number of subordinates who remain on the field." The 16 ninth-grade provinces also have differences in population and resources. The one who remains on the field with the most subordinates will be the first to choose the province he will be in charge of in the future. Not allowing the sons of Yu clan to speak, Yu Miao waved his hand and said, "Now, the test of your cultivation base will begin. All sons of Yu clan will release your aura, and the strongest 48 will send 100 subordinates into the field to fight it out." Wu Qi took a deep breath and gave Yu Miao and Yu Mu a deep look. These elders of Yu clan are really despicable. I can't believe they actually came up with such a despicable way of selection. Not only did they pick 48 sons with the strongest cultivation base, but they did not even need to participate in the duel, and instead, let their subordinates fight it out. By doing this, it was clear that Yu clan did not treat people as human beings. The sons of Yu clan would not face any risk, and all the danger would be passed on to the subordinates of these sons. But Wu Qi also felt that this method of selection was somewhat reasonable. Birds of a feather flock together, and the sons with strong individual ability would naturally have elite subordinates around them. The sons with weak individual ability would not be able to gather any useful people around them. This rule was somewhat interesting. With all kinds of thoughts swirling in his mind, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and kept Yu Miao's appearance firmly in his mind. He still remembered that when he first came to Panga Continent, Yu Miao had given Wu Qi a slap, which nearly killed him. He had to get his revenge. While Wu Qi was lost in thought, the elders of Yu clan had already selected 48 sons with the strongest cultivation base using a mystic art. Apart from the 7 strongest sons of Yu clan, Yu Miao and the other 19 brothers had the same cultivation base. 21 sons were slightly weaker than them, and the remaining dozens were not as strong as them, thus losing the qualification to compete for the power of prefecture overseer. Yu Miao nodded with satisfaction. Without wasting any time, he gently clapped his hands and said in a deep voice, "Very well. All of you are the elites of the younger generation of Yu clan. Quickly pick 100 subordinates and enter the duel." 6 hours later, the 16 sons with the most subordinates left in the arena will win the power of prefecture overseer. Yu Miao chuckled and said indifferently, "For the sake of fairness, the guards chosen by your elders are not allowed to participate in the duel. Your every move is under our control, and only the subordinates you have cultivated and recruited in your respective directorate of celestials are allowed to participate in the duel. No one is allowed to do anything that violates the rules." Another elder added, "Not only are you not allowed to use the guards given by your elders, but your subordinates are also allowed to use the talismans and magical items you have made. Otherwise, you will be considered as violating the rules, and you will be deprived of the right to win the power of prefecture overseer." Yu Miao's words made the faces of at least 10 of the 48 sons of Yu clan who were qualified to participate in the duel fall. Wu Qi found it funny. These people must have some spies around them, haven't they? It was a pity that the elders of Yu clan were serious about selecting some elite sons to take the post of prefecture overseer. Therefore, the little tricks of these sons were useless in front of these elders. Yu Miao took a deep breath, then turned to look at Wu Qi and said, "Ten Lang, it's all up to you now. Protect them. The more one person survives, the more confident we will be." Wu Qi nodded. The outcome of the duel would depend on the number of people left in the end. So, he really had to take care of Yu Miao's subordinates and not let them all die. Then he told the oracles around him that he wanted them to fight with all their might, and that if they died, he would treat their families well. He also promised them that if they could survive the duel, each of these oracles would be appointed as the great oracles of the Directorate of Celestials in a province when he took over the power of a province. Yu Miao's words made the eyes of the oracles around him turn red. The post of great oracle of a province was more than enough to make these junior oracles fight with their lives on the line. As Yu Miao gave the order, the teams of 100 chosen by the 48 sons of Yu clan who were qualified to participate in the duel walked into the arena in the center of the Great Hall. It was none other than Wu Qi who led the 99 oracles to the duel. Chapter 576. In the spacious arena, Wu Qi and the other 4,800 men were lined up in 48 neat phalanxes. In the center of the arena, Yu Mu, and other elders were holding a grand sacrificial ceremony, praying to the ghosts and deities of heaven and earth to protect them. They wanted them to choose the most elite and suitable disciples and bless them, so that they could safely rule the 16 ninth-grade provinces. A huge altar rose from the ground, on which were placed many memorial tablets carved with the names and true images of the ghosts and deities of heaven and earth. Wu Qi noticed that among the many memorial tablets of ghosts and deities worshipped in Yu clan, many of them had the names of their ancestors. Among the ghosts and deities, the ancestors of Yu clan were ranked higher than many powerful ghosts and deities. As the Grand Oracle of Zhong Province's Directorate of Celestials, it was Yu Mu's job to perform such rituals to worship ghosts and deities. As he chanted a few incantations and danced in a strange manner for a while, a gust of chilly wind suddenly blew over the altar. Hundreds of hazy shadows abruptly appeared on the altar, and the lights in the great hall dimmed abruptly. A terrible pressure emanated from these shadows, causing Wu Qi's heart to throb with a sharp pain. Wu Qi stared at these shadows in horror. Were these the ghosts and deities worshipped by Yu clan? As long as one knew some of the secret incantations of Yu clan, one could control these ghosts and deities to exert extremely terrible destructive power and all kinds of unimaginable magical effects. In the Tao of Ghosts and Deities inherited by Princess Zhanglu, it was mentioned that the ghosts and deities worshipped by these clans could only be controlled by their bloodline. Even if Wu Qi knew the secret incantations of Yu clan, he could not control these ghosts and deities because he was not a member of the Yu clan. Judging from the aura of these ghosts and deities, the strongest among them definitely had the cultivation base of a high-tier gold immortal. The strength of the ghosts and deities worshipped by an oracle clan was also one of the conditions to judge whether a clan was strong or not. Among the ghosts and deities worshipped by the Yu clan of Zhong province, there was a high-tier gold immortal. Wu Qi could not help but fantasize again. If the Yu clan of Zhong province was like this, what kind of scene would it be like in the imperial city of Diyu? As he stared in astonishment at the ghosts and deities who had appeared on the altar, he secretly exercised his chaotic divine eyes and saw the distorted space behind them through their figures. These ghosts and immortals were different from the gods born by the heaven and earth. They were different from the ghosts transformed from the souls of human beings after they died. Instead, they were another kind of powerful and wonderful creatures. They lived in an unknown void parallel to this world. Only the existents who understood the Tao of ghosts and immortals could use spells to tear open the void and communicate with these wonderful beings. What surprised Wu Qi even more was that among these ghosts and deities, was that some of them looked similar to the pictures carved on the ancestral tablets of Yu clan's ancestors. He could not believe that one of the ancestors of Yu clan had used a mystic art to transform himself into a ghost or deity. Wu Qi could not help but admire the heritage of these powerful clans on Pangu continent. The transformation of a human into a ghost or deity was more feared by the heaven and earth than the transformation from a human into a heaven immortal, and the heavenly tribulation one would have to suffer was even more terrifying. It was fortunate that these ancestors of Yu clan had the perseverance and strength to complete such an incredible transformation. Hundreds of ghosts and deities appeared on the altar, and Yu Miao and the other elders of Yu clan knelt down at the same time, worshipping them devoutly. A column of Yu clan's private armored soldiers rumbled into the arena, dragging a large number of fleshy cattle, sheep, and other livestock. At Yu Miao's order, the soldiers chopped up the cattle and sheep in front of the altar. Blood sprayed out with a pungent smell toward the altar, which was surrounded by a chilly wind. The ghosts and deities laughed joyfully, then spread their big, hazy hands and beckoned at the cattle and sheep. A gust of chilly wind rose from the ground, and the bodies of the cattle and sheep shriveled and turned into ashes in an instant. All the blood, energy essence, and even their souls were grabbed by the ghosts and deities, fusing into their bodies in a flash. The figures of all the ghosts and deities became clearer, and they seemed to be more energetic. Some of them laughed contentedly, then turned and disappeared without a trace. But there were still hundreds of ghosts and deities who stayed on the altar, looking down with flickering eyes. Yu Miao and the others offered a large number of joss sticks and candles, and then all the elders of Yu clan withdrew from the arena at the same time, returning to the stone chairs hovering above the arena. Yu Mu waved his hand majestically and cried out in a deep voice, "This is the hour. Under the witness of all the ghosts and deities, you will fight with all your might. Fight for the future of yourselves and your masters." After pondering for a brief moment, Yu Miao continued in a deep voice, "This duel is of great importance. The 16 sons who have won the position of prefecture overseer will become the elites that Yu clan will focus on cultivating. In the future, priority will be given to the selection of the clan head and elders." As soon as Yu Miao said that, the atmosphere in the great hall changed. The eyes of those sons of Yu clan who were not on the list of 48 turned green with jealousy, while those who were on the list and whose subordinates had entered the arena had their eyes turned red, glaring fiercely at their brothers like hungry wolves. Panting, Yu Miao clenched his fists and made a gesture to Wu Qi, telling him to kill at all costs. Not only Yu Miao, but the 7 strongest sons of Yu clan also did the same. They rose to their feet abruptly and made a throat-slitting gesture to their subordinates, indicating that they should not hold back and just kill at all costs. All kinds of accidents could happen in a large-scale duel involving thousands of people. In order to avoid any accidents, the 7 strongest sons of Yu clan could only ask their subordinates to fight with all their strength. Suddenly, a great green flame burst out of the altar, and Yu Miao cried out, "Let's begin! Life and death are decreed by fate, and today is the day to fight for your future." Wu Qi opened his eyes abruptly. With a cold snort, he pulled out dozens of gold nuggets from under his sleeve and threw them out. Shrill whistles rang out as dozens of golden specks swept across the arena. Over 100 oracles and warriors who participated in the duel were pierced through by the gold nuggets thrown out by Wu Qi, howling miserably. The powerful force attached to the gold nuggets exploded with a boom, blowing the bodies of over 100 people who were hit to pieces. Blood and flesh sprayed all over the place, knocking down many of their companions around them. "Retreat! Form a formation to protect yourselves. You don't need to do anything." Wu Qi gave a light shout to the 99 oracles of Anlu County's Directorate of Celestials, then quickly retreated with them. Wu Qi struck out abruptly, shattering the bodies of over 100 people with just one strike. Such a ferocious attack had frightened everyone in the arena. For a moment, no one dared to make a move. Wu Qi smoothly retreated to the edge of the arena with the 99 oracles and asked them to form a formation to protect themselves. Quickly, these oracles took out a large number of bone talismans and laid out countless restrictive spells to surround themselves. Standing outside the formation, Wu Qi narrowed his eyes at the moon oracles and smiled. 99% of the oracles in the arena were star oracles, and even the 9-star oracles only possessed the overall strength of nascent divinity realm. Apart from the 7 strongest sons of Yu clan, who each had about 10 moon oracles under their command, the rest of them only had 1 or 2 moon oracles at most. After all, with Yu Miao and Yu Mu's words, these sons of Yu clan dared not to let the guards sent by their elders participate in the duel. Judging from the age, cultivation base, and status of these sons of Yu clan, they were at most the great oracles of a county in Zhong province, and it was already very impressive for them to have a few moon oracles as their subordinates. The strongest among them were only a few warriors who had broken through the 6 stars realm of Panga Heaven. There were only 7 warriors of this level in total, and they happened to be the subordinates of each of the 7 strongest sons of Yu clan. Their faces fell dramatically when they saw Wu Qi kill more than 100 people in a flash with such a brutal strike. It was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but the moon oracles under the 7 strongest sons of Yu clan began to recite incantations at the same time and sprinkle out bone talismans. Bright lights flickered as the star oracles behind them were protected by layers of restrictive spells. At the same time, these moon oracles attacked the subordinates of the other sons of Yu clan. Flames and electric arcs shot across the sky, and the entire arena was immediately enveloped by the sound of explosions and smoke. However, the 7 strongest warriors drew their weapons at the same time and attacked Wu Qi at the same time. Wu Qi watched indifferently as the 7 powerful human warriors charged at him, but Yu Miao, who was sitting high up in the audience, had his face fall as he rose to his feet in anger. Glaring furiously at the 7 most outstanding brothers of his generation, he gritted his teeth and snorted, "Are you coming at me on purpose?" The 7 brothers just gave him a proud look. Among them, the 3rd brother, Yu Mu, who had spoken to Yu Miao in front of the mansion, twitched the corner of his mouth and smiled faintly. This man recruited by Brother 17 is very powerful. He might even surpass us, his brothers. Yu Miao suddenly understood. Wu Qi had killed more than 100 opponents with a single strike, and this had aroused the fear of his 7 brothers, causing them to join forces to attack him. Looking at the 7 human warriors who were charging at him, Wu Qi shook his head gently. The first heaven of Pangu realm, the first Panga heaven, corresponded to the realm of heaven immortals. The first Panga heaven was divided into 9 heavenly realms, each of which corresponded to the cultivation base of a 4th-tier heaven immortal. Wu Qi's cultivation base of a 9th-tier heaven immortal was the cultivation base that had broken through the 7 stars realm of the first Panga heaven. But these 7 warriors who had broken through the 6 stars realm of the first Panga heaven were still a long way from Wu Qi. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi stuck out his chest and faced the weapons that the 7 warriors were hacking at him. Amidst a deafening clang, the 7 weapons struck Wu Qi almost at the same time. Wu Qi's body trembled, and the tremendous counterforce shattered the 7 weapons. Then he punched out with a backhand, and a stream of purple energy transformed into a ferocious dragon and soared into the sky. The 7 warriors were dragged into the purple dragon at the same time, and as the purple energy swirled around them, blood sprayed out in all directions, and they were killed at the same time. Wu Qi burst into wild laughter. He took a step forward, and his fists fell like raindrops, killing more than half of the 47 warriors sent by the Yu brothers in a flash. Of the 4,000 warriors, more than 2,700 were killed by Wu Qi, their blood spilling all over the ground. The moon oracles who served Yu Miao and the other 6 were all slaughtered by Wu Qi alone. With his cultivation base of a 9th-tier heaven immortal, it did not take Wu Qi any effort to kill these weak oracles, who were caught off guard. The ghosts and deities on the altar burst into laughter. They waved their hands at the blood on the ground with satisfaction, and the blood and souls of the dead flew into their hands at the same time, becoming their delightful food. The laughter of the ghosts and deities shook the great hall, and the faces of the many sons of the Yu clan in the stands flickered. Suddenly Yu Miao threw his head back and laughed, his voice filled with boundless pleasure. Chapter 577. Everyone in the Yu clan fell silent. Wu Qi had killed more than half of the people who participated in the duel, and the ratio was extremely balanced. Of the 47 teams who participated in the duel, he had killed more than 50 people from each team. Judging from his means and cultivation base, and the fact that the 99 oracles of Enlu County had formed a formation to protect themselves, did that not mean that the first place was going to belong to Yu Mu? Yu Mu laughed complacently in the stands. All the other brothers who participated in the duel had suffered heavy casualties, and more than half of their men were either killed or wounded. Who could have more men than him? Among the 16 ninth-grade provinces, he would definitely choose the one with the largest population and the richest resources. With the support of the resources of one province, he was confident that he could break through the bottleneck of Moon Oracle in the next few decades. Covered in blood, Wu Qi stood calmly at the edge of the arena, protecting the 99 oracles behind him. Looking at his dumbfounded opponents, Wu Qi said coolly, "I'm sorry, gentlemen. The first place belongs to Yu Mu, the great oracle of Enlu County's Directorate of Celestials. You'd better fight for the other 15 places." All the oracles and warriors who participated in the duel fell silent. Wu Qi's crazy killing had scared them out of their wits. What was the point of a flock of sheep fighting a lion? They exchanged a glance, then retreated to a far distance at the same time, avoiding Wu Qi's corner. Sitting cross-legged in the sky, Yu Mu smiled. Glancing at Yu Mu, who was laughing excitedly, he nodded slowly and said, "Yu Huai's son? He does have some ability." Speaking of which, Yu Mu has just been appointed to Enlu County, hasn't he? It's his luck to be able to recruit such a warrior. A strange gleam flickered in Yu Mu's eyes as he gave Wu Qi a cold glance and said, "Don't you find it strange, big brother? How could there be such an expert in Enlu County? Is it so easy to break through the 7 stars realm of the first Panga heaven?" Yu Mu frowned. Just as he was about to answer Yu Mu thrust his palm toward Wu Qi. A ghostly howl rang out in the air. A huge, grayish-white palm, about 10 feet in circumference, pressed down towards Wu Qi's head, along with which an overwhelming evil power poured down from the sky. Suddenly, countless hundreds of feet tall tornadoes emerged on the battleground, and the roaring of the fierce winds shook people's hearts, as if their souls were about to be sucked out of their bodies. Wu Qi raised his head in shock. He clenched his fists and punched at the grayish-white palm. The power used by Yu Mu was extremely ingenious, equivalent to the strongest power possessed by a 9th-tier heaven immortal. 3 ghost faces could be vaguely seen looming in the grayish-white palm, breathing chilly winds and evil auras from time to time. A decaying aura of death swirled around the palm, turning the stone floor of the battleground grayish-white abruptly. Invaded by the decaying aura of death, even the stone floor seemed to have lost its vitality and luster. The palms smashed heavily onto Wu Qi's fists. Wu Qi's body sank, and he gave a muffled snort as he bent his knees and sprang up. He growled in a deep voice, then his fists suddenly expanded to twice the size of their original size. 2 balls of purple fist silhouettes soared into the sky along with a muffled whistling sound, pushing the grayish-white giant palm up tens of feet high. The purple mist around Wu Qi towered into the sky and turned into a dense purple cloud over his head, firmly blocking the palm that Yu Miao had thrust out with a backhand. The countless tornadoes in the battleground exploded one after another, sending grayish-white airflows that swept across the ground like a raging river, causing the frightened oracles and warriors to stagger and lose their balance. Some of them even fell to the ground, rolled up by the rapid airflows, and smashed heavily against the towering stone wall at the edge of the battleground. The 2 purple fist shadows thrown out by Wu Qi and the huge grayish-white palm collided rapidly in midair. In just a fraction of a second, they had collided tens of thousands of times, producing a series of sharp noises that turned into a long rumble that made all the sons of Yu clan cover their ears with their hands. The bodies of the weaker oracles were shattered by the rumble, and they fell to the ground with blood spurting out of their bodies. The ghosts and deities on the altars were the happiest. The oracles who were killed on the spot flew up into the air and were caught by these ghosts and deities, who devoured their blood essence and souls in just a few bites. Shrill howls rang out incessantly, the last screams of the oracles as their souls were devoured. The screams came directly from the depths of their souls, and the faces of all the sons of Yu clan in the great hall fell with horror. Their bodies swayed, and they almost fell to the ground. Yu Mu gave Yu Miao a displeased look and snapped, "What are you doing, Yu Miao?" Yu Mu glanced at Wu Qi, who was struggling under his palm strike, then shook his head and said with a sigh, "I suspect that this man is a guard that Yu Huai gave to Yu Mu in private. Otherwise, with Yu Mu's cultivation base, how could a remote place like Enlu County, which has been occupied by itinerant cultivators and immortals for hundreds of years, produce such a strong warrior?" He gave Yu Miao a gentle smile, then threw another palm toward Wu Qi with a backhand. "The rules of the duel we've set can't be broken by these ungrateful villains," Yu Miao said coolly. "Otherwise, where will the dignity of the elders of Yu clan be?" Yu Mu's face darkened, and he gave Yu Mu a sideways glance with a flicker in his eyes. Yu Mu had already struck the second palm strike, and it was not appropriate for Yu Mu to stop it. He could only watch as a dark green palm strike with a pungent smell of herbs pressed down toward Wu Qi. Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the second palm strike. He could only let out a bitter cry as all his muscles and bones shook violently, exerting all the strength in his body. If he could use all kinds of divine abilities and mystic arts, Wu Qi would have at least 100 ways to easily fend off Yu Mu's palm strike, although it was powerful and heavy, but it lacked all kinds of profound changes. But now, he was playing the identity of a human warrior who did not have any divine abilities or magic power. He was just a warrior of brute force, and the few divine abilities he knew, the Kwafu chasing the sun step, were of no help to Yu Mu's palm strike. If he were to use the magic of an immortal in front of so many elders of Yu clan, he would be courting death. Cursing Yu Mu's 18 generations of ancestors in his heart, Wu Qi gave a long hiss, and had no choice but to use all the brute force in his body to keep throwing his fists upward. For a moment, it seemed as if Wu Qi had grown thousands of arms, throwing countless fists into the air and smashing Yu Mu's first grayish-white palm strike backward. The chilly wind and evil aura kept shattering, gradually turning the palm strike into nothingness. Just as the first grayish-white palm strike was about to be completely destroyed, the second pale-green palm strike had already fallen silently. It fused with the remaining force of the first palm strike and smashed down toward Wu Qi's head with the weight of Mount Tai. Wu Qi's fists shattered with a deafening boom. His body went limp, and he fell heavily to the ground with both knees. A tremendous force passed through Wu Qi's body and smashed into the ground, creating a large pit about 1 mile in diameter and tens of feet deep. Smoke and dust flew in all directions, and Wu Qi's body fell straight into the pit. All of his fist shadows were shattered, and the pale green palm shadows fell straight on his body, shattering all of his clothes and revealing his streamlined muscles that were constantly twitching and vibrating. Wu Qi covered his face with both hands and curled up on the ground, allowing the palm strike to hit him. The palm strike, sticky as ink, penetrating to the bone and carrying a terrible poison, smashed into Wu Qi's body. Suddenly, a large sheet of purple light burst out from Wu Qi's skin, and the strong body condensed by the true body of heaven and earth scripture burst out with a very strong defensive force, forming a dense wall of energy to block the poison. The dark green poisonous gas spread in all directions like countless venomous snakes. Hundreds of oracles and warriors on the battleground did not have enough time to defend, and the poisonous gas landed on their bodies. Soon, their bodies festered and turned into rotten corpses, falling to the ground. The stench of rotting corpses spread in all directions, causing many of the sons of Yu clan to cover their noses. On the other hand, the ghosts and deities on the altar laughed in unison, reaching out their hands to grab the rotting corpses. These oracles and warriors had died miserably, and their souls were filled with boundless resentment. This kind of negative energy was the best tonic for these ghosts and deities. Seeing the rotting corpses being devoured by the ghosts and deities, the remaining oracles and warriors screamed and fled in all directions, no longer caring that the duel was related to the lives and future of their masters, and that it was directly related to their future glory and wealth. Their lives were the most important, and all other glory and splendor could only be enjoyed if they were still alive. These oracles and warriors were not stupid, and they dared not to get involved in the fight between Yu Miao and Wu Qi. Yu Miao's second palm strike was more than twice as strong as the first. In other words, it was twice as strong as Wu Qi's strongest attack. The true body condensed by Wu Qi's true body of heaven and earth scripture had blocked the terrible poisonous gas in the palm strike, but it could not withstand the pure physical force. Part of the true body collapsed, and the terrible palm strike went straight through Wu Qi's internal organs. Seeing that Wu Qi was about to be seriously injured by the palm strike, Wu Qi's body flickered as he took off the dark evil soul bead. A dense purple mist towered up from his body and enveloped him. He curled up in it, using it to block everyone's sight. Black dragon scales emerged from under his skin as he used the mighty dragon body cultivated by the dragon transformation script to block the residual force of the second palm strike. Cracking noises kept ringing out as Wu Qi was pushed hundreds of feet deep into the ground by the palm strike. With great difficulty, he managed to neutralize the terrible force contained in the second palm strike and soared up into the sky, tottering and on the verge of collapse. But, before Wu Qi could leave the ground, Yu Miao had already thrown a third palm strike at him with a gloomy face. Yu Miao had added a little more strength to this palm strike, making it 10 times more powerful than the second one. There was no way that Wu Qi could block it. After all, Yu Miao had the cultivation base of a gold immortal, while Wu Qi was only a 9th-tier heaven immortal at most. Seeing the dark palm strike coming down toward his head, Wu Qi gave a furious roar and crossed his legs, abruptly exercising the Kuafu chasing the sun step. With a sway of his body, Wu Qi dodged Yu Miao's third palm strike and came right in front of Yu Miao in the blink of an eye. Spreading his elbows apart, Wu Qi kicked Yu Miao's face with his knee. A miserable howl rang out as Yu Miao's nose broke and blood sprayed out of his mouth and nostrils. Tens of thousands of people in the great hall cried out in alarm. Chapter 578. Wu Qi felt the bridge of Yu Miao's nose, which was as fragile as an eggshell, right before his hard kneecap. Accompanied by a crisp cracking sound, the bridge of Yu Miao's nose and half of his facial bone caved in. Blood sprayed out from around Wu Qi's knees, followed by Yu Miao's snot and some unknown liquid, which was probably his saliva. After that, Wu Qi habitually used one of the killer moves taught to him by Wu Wang, who had knocked Yu Miao unconscious with his knee. Then he smashed his elbows down with all his might, shattering Yu Miao's shoulder bones. The heavy blow not only shattered his shoulder blades and collarbone, but also shattered 5 or 6 of his ribs. Then, Wu Qi thrust his other leg forward and kneed Yu Miao's crotch. Wu Qi felt 2 oval-shaped meatballs shatter under his kneecap. His hands suddenly became as soft as pythons as they coiled around Yu Miao's neck, ready to break it and kill this old fellow who had been giving him trouble time and time again, intentionally or unintentionally. Yu Miao, who was standing off to the side, could only watch helplessly as Wu Qi carried out such a cruel and inhumane attack on his brother. Wu Qi had destroyed Yu Miao's face, crushed his shoulder bone, and broken his crotch, but Yu Miao remained unmoved. Instead, he watched quietly with a strange smile on his face. But when Wu Qi coiled around Yu Miao's neck and was about to kill him, Yu Miao finally stopped him. A thin bone talisman was burned to ashes on his fingertip, and a plume of black smoke shot toward Wu Qi like a poisonous snake. A shrill whistle rang out, and a thumb-sized dent suddenly appeared on Wu Qi's rib cage. If Wu Qi insisted on killing Yu Miao, the black smoke would definitely pierce through his ribs, penetrate his internal organs, and kill him on the spot the moment he made his move. Reluctantly, Wu Qi loosened his grip on Yu Miao's neck and shot backward with a shake of his body. Only then did Yu Miao's third palm strike fall to the ground. A miserable howl rang out as the formation formed by the 99 star oracles Yu Miao brought here was hit by the palm strike. The formation shattered, and the 99 star oracles were smashed into minced meat. Blood and gore splattered in all directions, adding a tint of blood to the cruel arena. The ghosts and deities on the altars laughed joyfully. They rushed forward to devour the blood, flesh, and souls of the oracles who had died tragically. Wu Qi landed back in the arena. His eyes flickered with a threatening blood-red gleam as he stared fiercely at Yu Miao, who had interfered in the duel. "Grand Oracle, why are you protecting this old fool?" Yu Mu's heart skipped a beat when he saw the ferocious and merciless gleam in Wu Qi's eyes. Hastily, he crushed 2 bone talismans and cast a thick defensive barrier on himself. The other elders also woke up as if they were awakened from a dream. One after another, they crushed the bone talismans to protect themselves. In a flurry, a few elders, who were obviously close to Yu Miao, fed him life-saving spirit pills and reconnected his broken bones. Unfortunately, although the bones could be put back together, the lower part of his body that was crushed by Wu Qi's knee could not be healed. However, Yu Miao was already very old, and the object in his lower body might not be of any use to him anymore. So what if it was broken? At most, his beard would be stripped off in the future, and it would not cause any harm to his cultivation base. Several elders rose to their feet angrily. Black smoke swirled around them, and various strange phenomena such as stars, wind, and thunder could be seen flashing around them. They stared angrily at Wu Qi and were about to attack Wu Qi. How dare a mere 100-man lieutenant of the military court of Zhong Province brazenly attack the left minister of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong Province? Yu Miao was one of the elders of Yu clan, an elder who held real power. If word got out that he was injured by Wu Qi, how could the elders of Yu clan feel ashamed? All the sons of Yu clan were struck dumb with fear. Even Yu Miao was sitting blankly in the audience, not daring to make a sound. Yu Miao was the left minister of the Directorate of Celestials. As the oracles of the Yu dynasty, although they possessed extremely profound magic power, they were born with weaknesses, just like the warriors of the human race. The souls of human warriors were weak, and once a cultivator used a divine ability or magic to attack the soul, the human warrior would not be able to fight back. Comparatively speaking, the oracles of the human race had profound magic power, and their souls were protected by ghost gods. Some of them had souls that were a few times stronger than immortals of the same level. But comparatively speaking, the fleshly bodies of human oracles were too weak. A great oracle like Yu Miao had been dealing with ghost gods and otherworldly items for many years, and his body had been eroded by all kinds of evil forces, which made his fleshly body much stronger than ordinary people. Yu Miao, for example, had the cultivation base of a gold immortal, and his fleshly body was strong enough to fight against a middle-tier immortal. But comparatively speaking, the fleshly strength of a middle-tier immortal was only about the strength of an 18th-tier heaven immortal, which was too weak compared to Wu Qi. What was even more fatal was that oracles like Yu Miao did not have any experience in close combat. In their long lives, they were more accustomed to killing their enemies with all kinds of divine abilities and mystic arts. Close combat was what their personal guards did. The oracles provided the defense of the warrior's soul, while the guards provided the oracles with close combat protection. This was the most common mode of warfare used by the army of the Yu dynasty. Therefore, when Wu Qi bolted up to Yu Miao with the Kuafu chasing the sun step and attacked him, Yu Miao was so badly beaten that he could not fight back and was almost killed by Wu Qi. It was not only a humiliation to Yu Miao, but also a humiliation to the entire Elders' Council of Yu Clan. Therefore, after hastily casting all kinds of defensive spells on themselves, the Elders of Yu Clan could not help but attack Wu Qi. Wu Qi's eyes shone with a cold gleam, and his body was shrouded in purple mist. He was ready to respond to the attack. His cold gaze swept past the Yu family disciples on the viewing platform. He was confident that he could kill all of the direct descendants on the viewing platform under the combined attacks of the Yu family elders. With nothing more than a bolt of thunder magic, he could kill these elite sons of Yu Clan in an instant. In such a desperate situation, Wu Qi could not care less about exposing the fact that he knew the magic of immortals. At the worst, he could just change his identity and start over. In any case, he had learned the weaknesses of these oracles of the Yu dynasty. With his ability to appear and disappear unpredictably, it was not difficult for him to assassinate these oracles in the dark. He would just have to pay for what he had done today in the future. Crisp, cracking noises rang out from all his joints as a plume of purple mist rose slowly from behind Wu Qi's back. Amidst his hair, El Buzan, who had shrunk to the size of a hair, had raised his head. Wisps of flame could be seen coming out of his mouth, and he was ready to cooperate with Wu Qi to kill. The few elders of Yu Clan snorted coldly and performed incantation gestures, getting ready to strike. Just then, Yu Miao suddenly rose to his feet and cried out in a flat voice, "Forget it! Yu Miao has only himself to blame for what he has done." Yu Miao's words stunned all the elders of Yu Clan. About 60% of them looked at him thoughtfully, and then they all smiled strangely and returned to their seats as if nothing had happened. The other elder was taken aback. He gave Yu Miao a resentful glare, but in the end he slumped back into his seat. Only less than 30% of the elders jumped to their feet and questioned Yu Miao angrily. A few of them pointed at Yu Miao, who was severely wounded and unable to get up, and growled, saying that Yu Miao had only himself to blame after being severely wounded by Wu Qi. Why did Yu Miao say that Yu Miao had only himself to blame? Yu Mu glanced coldly at the elders who refused to give up and said coldly, "Yu Mu, do you dare to swear in the presence of all the ancestor gods on the altar that this Tan Lang is indeed a retainer you recruited, and not a guard arranged by your father or any of your seniors?" Yui was taken aback. He glanced at the hundreds of bloodthirsty ghosts and deities on the altar, then gritted his teeth and jumped into the arena. With a sway of his body, he came before the altar. He dropped to his knees, bit the tip of his finger, and swore with a drop of blood, "Ancestors, I, Yu Miao, swear with my soul that Tan Lang was indeed recruited by me in Anlu County. Tan Lang was born in the wilderness, and he is a warrior of the human race who comprehended the great Tao of Pangu on his own. He was not arranged by any elder of Yu clan. If I violate this oath, if I have concealed anything, I will offer my soul to you, ancestor gods, and let you do whatever you want to me. A gust of chilly wind spread out of the altar and penetrated Yu Miao's body in a flash, going in and out of his body for a long time. After a full quarter of an hour, the ferocious ghosts and deities finally nodded slowly and let out a few strange howls. Yu Miao smiled faintly. With a flick of his sleeve, he said in a deep voice, "Elder Yu Miao's accusation is nonsense. Tan Lang is a retainer recruited by Yu Miao himself. This is something that all the ancestor gods have investigated. What else can we say? Elder Yu Miao has caused trouble for no reason, and he has brought this calamity upon himself. He has no one to blame." The elders fell silent at the same time. In front of the many ghosts and deities on the altar, there was nothing they could say. Any disrespect to the ancestor god would not be tolerated, especially for the oracles of Great Yu. They knew very well how serious it was. If they were not careful when dealing with the ancestor god, they might get themselves into trouble. So why bother? Yu Miao was seriously injured and unable to get up, so Yu Miao took the lead and settled the matter. Judging from the scene of the duel just now, it was an undeniable fact that Yu Miao had come out on top. Therefore, he could choose the prefecture overseer of any of the 16 ninth-grade provinces at will. The other 47 sons of Yu clan reorganized their subordinates and held another duel to decide the ownership of the remaining 15 provinces. Yu Miao was seriously injured, and the elders on his side had lost their leader. Under the strong pressure from Yu Miao, they had no choice but to make this decision. Yu Miao rose to his feet excitedly, and without hesitation, he chose Hai Province, which was the most populous and had the richest resources among the 16 ninth-grade provinces. Wu Qi smiled as he watched Yu Miao pick and choose among the 16 provinces. Why did the name of Hai Province sound so familiar? The elders of Yu clan studied Wu Qi with strange expressions on their faces. Many of them had fierce gleams in their eyes, and it was clear that they did not have any goodwill toward Wu Qi. But Wu Qi was not afraid of them. He smiled and nodded at the elders, whose eyes were gleaming fiercely. His heart was also filled with killing intent. Chapter 579. Another storm of blood broke out in the arena in the Great Hall of Yu clan, as the power of the prefecture overseers of the 15 provinces was decided. Except for Yu Miao, who now had Wu Qi as his subordinate, who had won an unexpected victory, the power of the other 15 provinces had fallen into the hands of those who deserved it. Yu Miao and the other 6 strongest sons of Yu clan, as well as 8 other young men of similar age and cultivation base as Yu He, had gotten what they deserved. Another grand sacrificial ceremony was held. The elders of Yu clan led more than 100 sons to kowtow to the ghosts and deities on the altar, offering them even more abundant offerings, such as white sheep and black horses. Together with the blood, flesh, and souls of the thousands of oracles and warriors who had been killed in the second duel, the ghosts and deities worshipped by Yu clan on the altar were finally greatly satisfied. In Wu Qi's surprised gaze, dozens of ghosts and deities, whose bodies were shrouded in a blood-red glow that seemed to be dripping with blood, raised their hands at the same time. Amidst Yu Miao's pleas, these ghosts and deities bestowed their blessings upon the members of Yu clan. Perhaps it was because Wu Qi had killed more than 2,000 competitors and wounded Yu Miao, an elder of Yu clan, in front of everyone, that Wu Qi was greatly favored by these ghosts and deities. About 30 ghosts and deities sprayed out a great amount of blood-red light from their palms, which poured directly into Wu Qi's body, turning into a scorching hot stream that flowed through Wu Qi's body in an instant. Strange energy quickly filled Wu Qi's body, and Wu Qi could clearly sense that the strength of his fleshly body and soul were skyrocketing. What amazed Wu Qi even more was that countless strange runes suddenly appeared in front of his eyes, many of which were new runes that were not included in the Tao of ghosts and deities inherited by Princess Zhonglu, and he instantly understood the strange effects of these runes. It was the art of enlightenment. The priests of Diyu held bloody rituals and offered large amounts of blood and food to win the favor of the ghosts and deities worshipped by the family in exchange for great power. This was also the main reason why the aristocratic families of Diyu were able to surpass the ordinary soldiers in terms of cultivation. They could obtain power from the ghosts and gods through the sacrificial ceremony, so the speed of their cultivation was naturally faster than that of the ordinary soldiers who worked hard to cultivate themselves. A hot current was rolling and rocking crazily around him, while a ball of red light was vaguely seen rushing out from his body. The elders of the Yu family looked at Wu Qi with complicated expressions. In this grand ceremony, nearly 6,000 low-level oracles were sacrificed in exchange for the blessings of dozens of ghosts and deities. However, nearly half of the benefits were taken by Wu Qi alone, and the Yu family disciples did not get much. In the first 2 duels, Wu Qi alone had killed more than 2,000 people, and in the last duel, more than 3,000 people were killed. In total, nearly 6,000 star oracles and low-level soldiers had died in the duels. Even a wealthy family like the Yu family of Zhong province could not hold such a grand duel and sacrificial ceremony often. The loss of 6,000 oracles was the result of several battles in the past. If such a grand sacrificial ceremony was held frequently, it would definitely deplete the strength of the Directorate of Celestials of Zhong province, and it would also be criticized by the Directorate of Celestials of other provinces, which would bring great trouble to the Yu family. If it were not for the special situation of fighting for the power of Prefecture Overseer, the Yu family would not be willing to lose 6,000 low-level oracles at once. It was a great sacrifice in exchange for the blessings of more than 60 ghosts and deities worshipped by the family, and the power they bestowed upon them. Usually, only one ghost or deity would bestow a meager blessing during the daily sacrificial ceremony. When had it ever been like today, when so many ghosts and deities bestowed so much power at the same time? But half of the benefits were taken away by Wu Qi. It was all because he had killed the most people on the spot and beaten an elder of Yu clan. Yu Miao and the other elders of Yu clan had a bad feeling in their hearts. From the joyful howls of those ghosts and deities, they vaguely sensed that Wu Qi had beaten Yu Miao, and that was the reason why so many ghosts and deities bestowed all their power to him at the same time. Could it be that every time the family held a sacrificial ceremony in the future, they would have to mutilate a few elders to win the favor of these ghosts and deities? That was just too absurd and unruly. Wu Qi felt that the heat flow in his body was getting stronger and stronger, and it was getting more and more unbearable. At last, he threw his head back and let out a long, sonorous howl. Amidst the howl, muffled explosions rang out from Wu Qi's body. His muscles swelled up bit by bit, and a suffocating pressure kept spreading out of him, blowing away the dozens of Yu clan sons who were kneeling around him. Beneath the Great Hall of Yu clan, no, not only the Great Hall, but the entire grassland where Zhongning City was located, the energy veins beneath it began to surge. The energy veins throbbed like a human heart, and plumes of purple mist rose from the grassland 1,000,000 miles around Zhongning City at the same time. The purple mist, which could not be seen with naked eyes or sensed with divine sense, and could only be touched by the mystic cultivation technique of the human race, turned into dozens of dragon-shaped air waves and smashed straight into the Great Hall of Yu clan, injecting into Wu Qi's body. Among the dozens of ghosts and deities who had blessed Wu Qi, 7 of them were transformed from the ancestors of Yu clan. They were very pleased with some of Wu Qi's deeds, so when they injected the blood-red light into Wu Qi's body, they had specially fused some of their understanding of the true body of heaven and earth scripture and other human cultivation techniques. Dozens of glittering runes blinked and flickered around Wu Qi's body, quickly fusing into Wu Qi's body and bursting into a dazzling light under his skin. Attracted by these runes, the purple mist rushed whistling into Wu Qi's body, instantly turning into a part of Wu Qi's fleshly body. His muscles were wriggling, Wu Qi's face was twitching, and the purple gleam in his eyes shone to a distance of nearly 10 feet. He worked hard to circulate the true body of heaven and earth scripture, filling his body with the purple qi that was surging toward him. It filled every muscle fiber, every muscle, every bone, every inch of his meridians and blood vessels, strengthening his body and pushing his true body of heaven and earth scripture to climb to the peak. Each of these ghosts and deities worshipped by Yu clan possessed an unimaginable power, and a little reward from them was a great fortune to Wu Qi. Stimulated by the blood-red light and the purple mist, Wu Qi's true body of heaven and earth scripture was gradually climbing to a higher realm. 8th tier heaven immortal, 7th tier heaven immortal, 6th tier heaven immortal. With an efficiency that shocked even Wu Qi, his true body of heaven and earth scripture made a rapid breakthrough. In just 1 hour, under a situation that even Wu Qi could not understand, the strength of his fleshly body had broken through the limit of the true body of heaven and earth scripture, and was now strong enough to fight against a first-tier heaven immortal who specialized in body cultivation. He took a deep breath, and immediately a layer of purple light, about the thickness of a finger, emerged on the surface of his skin, glittering and translucent like a crystal. The layer of light swirled like ripples on the surface of his skin, roughly forming the shape of a suit of armor. Without even trying, Wu Qi could roughly sense the formidable defensive strength of this suit of armor. Every inch of it contained an incredible power. Although this armor, which was purely made of energy, did not have the wonderful auxiliary functions of a defensive immortal item, its pure physical defensive strength was definitely beyond that of an upper-grade immortal item. The group of elders of Yu clan stared at the strange phenomenon on the surface of Wu Qi's skin in astonishment. Yu Miao and a few other sons of Yu clan stared at Wu Qi's body with great jealousy. The 9 stars realm of the first Panga heaven. A cultivation base of a top-grade heaven immortal. Why does this guy have such a good fate? The 9 stars realm of the first Panga heaven? It was the highest realm that a human warrior could reach by practicing the foundation chapter of the true body of heaven and earth scripture. The cultivation base of a first-tier heaven immortal. One more step, and he would reach the realm of gold immortal, the overall strength of a gold immortal. From the fragmentary information passed down by the ghosts and deities just now, he knew that when he broke through the foundation chapter of the true body of heaven and earth scripture and began to practice the skin-strengthening chapter, he would truly reach the overall strength of a gold immortal. At that time, he would break through the so-called first Panga heaven of the human race and enter the Wanxiang Panga heaven. The 9 stars realm of the Wanxiang Panga heaven corresponded to the 18 realms of gold immortals, and each star realm corresponded to the overall strength of 2 tiers of gold immortals. Wu Qi's heart was filled with puzzlement and surprise. He had just broken through to the realm of 9th tier heaven immortal with the help of a wisp of innate energy from Princess Zhanglu, which had already made him overjoyed. But these ghosts and deities did indeed have an unpredictable power. With the sacrifice of 6,000 human lives and the blood of thousands of livestock, Wu Qi had obtained the blessings of over 30 ghosts and deities, and had raised his fleshly strength from the 9th tier of heaven immortal to the peak of the 1st tier of heaven immortal. He could not help but speculate maliciously. If there were enough low-grade oracles to be sacrificed, wouldn't Yu clan be able to easily cultivate a few gold immortals? Perhaps Yu clan would never dare to do so. Unless they killed all the low-grade oracles in the entire Directorate of Celestials in Zhong Province, they would never be able to gather so many low-grade oracles. If Yu clan really did that, it would be removed from the system of the Directorate of Celestials, wouldn't it? Accompanied by gloomy laughter, the ghosts and deities on the altar gradually turned into chilly winds and disappeared. Suddenly, a set of bizarre ritual steps of the blood sacrifice ceremony appeared in Wu Qi's mind. It was what those ghosts and deities had left for Wu Qi. They seemed to hope that Wu Qi could host such a blood sacrifice ceremony, and they even told Wu Qi that as long as Wu Qi offered enough blood sacrifices, they could give Wu Qi even greater power. Silently memorizing the steps of the blood sacrifice ceremony in his mind, Wu Qi took a deep breath. Yu Mu looked at Wu Qi with a complicated look in his eyes. He grinned and waved his hand weakly. Well, I've gained something from today's ceremony. Go back and rest for a few days, then go your own way. All the elders of Yu clan fixed their eyes on Wu Qi, their gazes stabbing and slashing at Wu Qi's body like knives. Wu Qi could not stand the atmosphere, so he hurriedly followed Yu Mu out of the great hall. As soon as they walked out of the front door, a dark shadow suddenly appeared in front of Wu Qi and Yumu. Like a ghost, Yu Huai grabbed both of their hands and said in a deep voice, "You've caused trouble. Come with me at once." "Humph, that old bastard Yu Miao is really cruel to you." Wu Qi was taken aback, and hastily let Yu Huai drag both of them out. Chapter 580. In Yu Huai's hall, where a chilly wind and evil aura blanketed everything and 108 coffins were placed, Wu Qi and Yu Mu sat side by side in front of Yu Huai. Each of them was sitting on a hassock made of spirit revival grass, from which little drops of natural energy flowed into Wu Qi's body from time to time. This kind of hassock was the favorite of the oracles of the human race. The energy produced by the spirit revival grass could effectively slow down the aging of their bodies and counteract the erosion caused by the evil aura of ghosts and deities. Wu Qi stared blankly at Yu Huai. A gray flame the size of a human head floated in front of Yu Huai, in which a few pieces of pale spirit bones were gradually being melted away by the cold flame. From time to time, Yu Huai would reach his skeletal hand into the flame and gently touch the bones with his fingers, gradually casting them into the shape of little puppets. There were a total of 3 grayish-white bone puppets. When the puppets were finally formed, Yu Huai gave Wu Qi a look and said in a deep voice, "Pluck out 3 hairs and give them to me." Wu Qi hesitated for a moment. The oracles of the human race had all kinds of cruel techniques. Who knew what Yu Huai wanted to do with his hair? Even though Princess Zhangli had inherited the Tao of ancient ghosts and deities, the human race had developed countless more cruel techniques, many of which were terrible things that even Princess Zhangli did not know and could not crack. But Wu Qi quickly pulled out 3 strands of his hair and gave them to Yu Huai. In any case, Wu Qi was still Yu Mu's most capable helper, and no matter how stupid Yu Huai was, he could not do anything to Wu Qi. Moreover, the 3 puppets looked very familiar. They should be some kind of substitute, not forbidden objects used to kill and harm people. Yu Huai, who looked as ferocious as a ghost, took the hair, brought it to his nose, and sniffed it deeply. He gave Wu Qi a surprised look and said in a low, hoarse voice, "Wonderful! You are so full of blood and energy essence. Well, even if you don't get the blessing of the ancestral gods today, it won't be long before you break through the 9 stars realm of the first Panga heaven. I'm very happy to have your help." Suddenly, tears of blood dripped from Yu Huai's eyes. There were 18 drops of blood in total. Each drop of sticky blood dripped down from his chin and flew up into the air, turning into twisted black runes that floated above the 3 puppets. Yu Huai chanted an incantation in a low voice and tied Wu Qi's hair to the 3 puppets. Behind him, a grayish-white airflow towered into the sky, and a looming shadow of a ghost god filled with pressure gradually appeared behind him. Just like Yu Huai, the ghost had no flesh or blood on its body. It was just a grayish-white skeleton. The ghost waved its hands slowly, and the runes transformed from the 18 blood tears from Yu Huai twisted abruptly, quickly turning into 18 tiny black skulls, flying towards the 3 puppets. 6 black skulls flew into each puppet's body, and the originally deathly white puppets turned jet black. Then, the strands of hair that Wu Qi had wrapped around the puppets began to burn at the same time. The green ghost flame burned them to ashes and left numerous pale green marks on the puppets' bodies. Taking a deep breath, Yu Huai kept chanting the incantation while his fingers moved back and forth on the puppets. Gradually, Wu Qi felt that he had some kind of inexplicable connection with the 3 puppets. He also sensed that there was an extremely evil and ferocious force hidden in them, like evil dragons trapped in Xianbing that could break out and hurt people at any time. And the source of this evil power came from the ghost floating behind Yu Huai. Wu Qi could clearly sense that the ghost deity possessed a frightening power that was exactly the same as the 3 puppets. It was as if the 3 puppets were just 3 tiny passageways, and the 3 evil forces were just 3 primers. When the puppets were destroyed, the 3 channels would immediately open up, allowing the power of the ghost to appear in the human world and deal a fatal blow to someone. Yu Huai finally completed the last step. As the ghost flame between his fingers sank into the puppets, he grabbed the 3 thumb-sized puppets and shoved them into Wu Qi's hand. "Hide them well," he said with a deep laugh. "They are 3 soul-reaping puppets. If anyone dares to attack you with a curse, they will be attacked by my prime ghost, Bone Ao, and their souls, flesh, and blood will become my food." Wu Qi grabbed the 3 soul-reaping puppets tightly. They were 3 life-saving talismans. He looked at Yu Huai and asked in a deep voice, "Why are you so sure that someone will attack me?" Yu Huai tilted his neck. His cervical vertebrae let out a horrible creaking noise. Even an idiot can figure it out. Yu Miao, that old bastard, was beaten up by you on the spot, and it is said that you even destroyed the treasure he used to carry on his family line. It would be strange if he did not retaliate against you. Laughing strangely, Yu Huai told Wu Qi about some of the internal affairs of Yu clan without any hesitation. Wu Qi felt a headache when he heard that. He could guess a lot of messy things that happened in the aristocratic clans, but what Yu Huai said was simply unbelievable, so messy that even Wu Qi could not help but gasp in amazement. Simply put, Yu Miao, the head of the Yu clan in Zhong province, was not Yu Miao's brother, but cousins. Yu Miao came from the Yu clan in Liangzhu, the capital city of Diyu, and was the main branch of the Yu clan in Diyu. Yu Miao was the lineal descendant of this branch of the Yu clan in Zhong province, and he was the eldest son. According to common sense, Yu Miao should be the head of the Yu clan in Zhong province, and the Grand Oracle of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong province should be him. But a long time ago, even Yu Huai could not tell what had happened. Yu Miao was suddenly appointed by the Yu clan in Liangzhu to come to Zhong province and take over the position of Yu Miao's biological father, who was the Grand Oracle of Zhong province at that time. Yu Miao was severely wounded in a fight with a gold immortal of the Celestial Court, and when he died, Yu Miao took over his position and became the head of the Yu clan in Zhong province. Not only did Yu Miao take over the position of the Grand Oracle of Zhong province, he even took over the position of Yu Miao's fiancée, who was still young at that time. She was Yu Miao's fiancée, the eldest daughter of a reclusive clan leader who possessed the bloodline of a heavenly god. Not only did she represent a powerful force, but she also possessed an innate energy that could help people break through bottlenecks and achieve great power. Not only did Yu Miao lose the position of clan leader and his high position of Grand Oracle, even his fiancée had become someone else's wife. Yu Miao flew into a rage, and he even caused some bloody incidents. But, under the violent suppression of the Yu clan in Liangzhu and the direct intervention of the reclusive clan, Yu Miao's counterattack eventually caused the members of the Yu clan who were loyal to him to suffer heavy losses, and he had no choice but to submit to Yu Miao. Because of Yu Miao's powerful background and formidable strength, Yu Miao could only take over the position of the left oracle of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong province and become the chief elder of the Yu clan. He was at a disadvantage both in terms of influence among the clan leader and real power in Zhong province. But, after so many years of hard work, Yu Miao still held great power in the clan. In order to prevent the entire Yu clan in Zhong province from being seriously affected, Yu Miao had made certain concessions to Yu Miao from time to time. But, as a result, Yu Miao kept pushing him. Although he could not do anything to Yu Miao, his children and grandchildren were greatly affected. What made him feel the most helpless was that his first wife, the woman with the bloodline of a heaven god and Yu Huai's biological mother, had an extremely weak ability to reproduce. Over the years, she and Yu Miao had only given birth to one son, Yu Huai. Yu Huai was also affected by his mother's bloodline. He had tried his best, but he had only given birth to one son, Yu Miao. His first wife was even more jealous. If Yu Miao dared to take in a concubine, the concubine and her family would disappear within 3 to 5 days. As a result, Yu Miao had very few children, and Yu Huai was the only son. On the other hand, Yu Miao had taken in many wives and concubines. Among the second generation of Yu clan, 10% of them were his biological sons. Among the over 100 most elite descendants of the third generation who were of the same generation as Yu Miao, 37 of them were Yu Miao's grandsons. As a result, Yu Miao had a firm grip on the power of the Yu clan in Zhong province, but he had an overall advantage in the competition between the second and third generations. Therefore, Yu Huai and Yu Miao's power in the Yu clan was greatly contested. Even though they were Yu Miao's biological sons and daughters, they could not compete with the numerous brothers and uncles who came from Yu Miao's lineage. What was more frightening was that Yu Miao was still giving birth to children to this day. His youngest twin sons were only 7 months old, and he had several wives and concubines who were pregnant. His children were working hard to reproduce like sewing machines, and more than a dozen of his grandchildren had their own offspring. Yu Huai looked at Wu Qi with a strange expression and murmured in a low voice, "You broke 2 of the treasures of his grandchildren with that kick of yours." The proudest thing in his life is that he has so many grandchildren that he has completely overwhelmed father. So, it's impossible for him not to retaliate against you. And father tolerates him a lot, so it's impossible for father to turn against Yu Miao for you. Wu Qi smacked his lips, then sucked in a cold breath and said with a wry smile, "That means I've destroyed Elder Yu Miao's proudest treasure?" Yu Huai stared at Wu Qi, nodded slowly, and said, "You've destroyed the last bit of dignity in Elder Yu Miao's life. He may not be shameless enough to kill you again, but all kinds of revenge will surely follow. After all, he has so many grandchildren." After pondering for a moment, Yu Huai frowned and said, "Not only his own grandchildren, but also the many collateral members of the Yu clan in Zhong province in outer heavenly realms. 99% of them are on good terms with him and are under his command. Not to mention the others, there are as many as 100 protectors of the people from the Yu clan in Zhong province in outer heavenly realms, and they have hundreds of thousands of troops under their command, as well as countless experts." Yu Miao suddenly raised his head and said angrily, "Father, are we just going to allow that old fool to press us step by step and plot against us step by step, and not allow us to fight back? Father, you don't have any real power in the clan until now, and it was not until last year that I took charge of the Directorate of Celestials in a province. If this goes on, when grandfather's lifespan runs out, where will you and I go?" Yu Huai frowned slightly, and his face darkened abruptly. Wu Qi, on the other hand, stuck out his chest and said with a proud smile, "Rest assured, Your Excellency Yu Huai. Just let them take their revenge. I'm not afraid of them at all." Before Wu Qi's voice could fade away, one of the 3 little puppets he carried with him suddenly melted without making a sound. Chapter 581. It was not an explosion or a crack, but a melting. The puppet made of spirit bones melted in Wu Qi's arms like an ice cube. When Wu Qi tore open his clothes and threw out the pool of liquid, it had turned pale green and carried a pungent stench. A thin layer of light burst out from the ground, which was paved with boulders, along with a series of popping noise. The pale green liquid was extremely corrosive, and the defensive formation on the floor of the hall was activated on its own, isolating the corrosive liquid from damaging the floor. All of a sudden, Wu Qi's hair stood on end. He sensed that in the void, right next to him, not in this main space, but in a parallel dimension, a few evil existences were cautiously sneaking toward him. These existences were very strong, at least equivalent to high-level heaven immortals. On top of that, they were emanating a strong evil aura that was full of bloodthirst and killing desire. Apart from that, there was no other aura. Wu Qi turned to look at Yu Huai, whose face had turned dark. He did not expect that right after he had made 3 life-saving spirit bone puppets for Wu Qi, and had just told Wu Qi about the internal situation of Yu clan, the enemy would swagger straight to his door. This was not giving him, Yu Huai or his father, Yu Miao, any face at all. Yu Huai's eyes shone with an eerie blood-red gleam as he gnashed his teeth and said, "Whoever he is really courting death. Bone Ao, kill him with all your might, and I'll send you 300 human warriors full of blood and energy as sacrifices some other day." Another grayish-white Wu Qi drifted out from behind Yu Huai. Bone Ao, whose body was covered in white bones, let out a satisfied laugh as he reached out both hands and grabbed at the void next to Wu Qi. A shrill howl suddenly rang through the hall. The void around Wu Qi shattered, and 6 twisted white shadows were pulled out of the void by the Bone Ao. The greedy Bone Ao laughed excitedly, then shoved the shadows into his mouth. These phantoms were also ghostly immortals that came from the same world as the Bone Ao. Devouring them would be extremely beneficial to the Bone Ao, just like how an immortal would devour the Ganoderma immortal spirit liquid. It could greatly replenish his vitality and stabilize his foundation. Gu Ao smiled complacently. Suddenly, a faintly discernible phosphorescent light spurted out from his 10 fingers. Dozens of pale bone swords shot out, circled around Wu Qi's body 3 times, and then suddenly disappeared into the void. All of a sudden, Wu Qi and the other 2 heard a miserable howl coming from somewhere in the Yu residence. That miserable howl seemed to ring in the ears of the 3 of them. It was filled with horror, despair, and disbelief. Following that, chaotic noises could be heard everywhere. It seemed as though that person's miserable cries had already alarmed the Yu family members, causing them to move out of the Yu residence. Before long, the door of the hall was suddenly opened. 2 oracles, who were shrouded in black robes and had green eyes that glowed faintly, walked slowly into the hall and dropped to their knees before Yu Huai. Your Excellency, Elder Yu Miao's 9th son, His Excellency Yu Miao, has died suddenly. Before he died, he felt as if thousands of arrows had pierced through his heart. All his blood essence and soul were extracted, leaving only a dried corpse behind. Yu Huai laughed grimly, then waved his hand and said, "It's that bastard Yu Miao? Yu Miao, the man who snatched the position of Great Oracle from you 2 years ago, is Yu Miao's 3rd son. Hee, I guess I've finally vented my anger this time?" Yu Miao smiled. He looked worriedly at the Bone Ao behind Yu Huai and asked in a low voice, "Will someone find out who killed that bastard?" Yu Huai smiled proudly and said indifferently, "Unless that old dog Yu Miao does it himself, no one will be able to find out who killed that bastard Yu Miao." Yu Miao will have to do it within a quarter of an hour, and he will have to use his prime magical artifact. Otherwise, he won't be able to find any clues after a quarter of an hour. Looking over his shoulder at the Bone Ao hovering behind him, Yu Huai sneered and said in a low voice, "Bone Ao is one of the ancestor gods worshipped by the Yu clan in Liangzhu. His power is beyond the imagination of the Yu clan in Zhong province. Bone Ao has been protecting the Yu clan in Liangzhu since the time of the great Emperor Xianyuan." Wu Qi looked up in horror. A ghost god who had existed since the time of the Yellow Emperor Xianyuan must be more powerful than these ghosts and gods of the Yu clan in Zhong province. However, the price of driving him to do it was not a small one. Yu Huai had just promised 300 human warriors with abundant blood and energy as the blood sacrifice. Where was he going to find so many warriors to sacrifice? Yu Huai waved his hand. The 2 oracles who came in to report the news answered in a deep voice, rose to their feet, and walked out slowly. The door of the great hall slowly closed, and the interior became dark again. Yu Huai placed his hands on his knees and frowned as he looked at Yu Miao, then at Wu Qi. The selection of 16 third-generation disciples as prefecture overseers of 9th-grade provinces is an important strategy for the Yu clan in Zhong province to strengthen itself. Yu Huai said in a deep voice, "For a long time, the Yu clan has only held great power in the Directorate of Celestials in the Imperial Court of Diyu. But this time, because of the meritorious service of betraying the former prefecture overseer of Zhong province, Feng Lingling, Yu clan has obtained the power of 30 provinces." Frowning, Yu Huai said in a low voice, "This is an excellent opportunity for the Yu clan to expand its power from the Directorate of Celestials. Yu Miao, my father and grandfather intend to take this opportunity to let the Yu clan in Liangzhu directly intervene in Zhong province. They want to take away at least 25 of the 30 provinces." Yu Miao looked at Yu Huai in shock, and Wu Qi also looked at him in confusion. It was true that taking away the power of 25 provinces from the Yu clan in Zhong province would bring great benefits to the Yu clan in Liangzhu, but would the Yu clan in Zhong province be willing to do so? Yu Miao was certainly loyal to the Yu clan in Liangzhu, but would the Yu clan in Zhong province be willing to let go of such a great benefit? Yu Huai said, "Therefore, whether you are competing for the position of prefecture overseer or taking over the power of prefecture overseer in the future, my father and grandfather can't help you too much. Everything will depend on you and Tan Lang. He held up a finger and said in a deep voice, 1 year. Both of you stay outside for 1 year and let those people around you Miao do something against you. Then we will have a chance to take advantage of. Wu Qi frowned. Yu Huai wanted to use Yu Miao and himself as bait to lure Yu Miao and his people to attack him. As long as Yu Miao got his hands on the evidence that Yu Miao and his people had harmed the people of Yu clan, as the head clan of Yu, the Yu clan in Liangzhu would have an excellent excuse to interfere. But, under the strong suppression of Yu Miao and his people, Yu Miao's life might not be in danger, but he would be in an awkward situation. Yu Huai also looked at Wu Qi and said in a deep voice, if it weren't for Tan Lang, I would only let Yu Miao be a prefecture overseer and get some benefits for himself. The plan of the Yu clan in Liangzhu would not involve you. But, since Yu Miao has a strong helper like you, we hope you can help the Yu clan in Liangzhu to accomplish this. Just as Wu Qi was about to speak, the puppet in his arms suddenly burst into flames. The ghastly blue flame made Wu Qi's skin sizzle, and a patch of skin the size of a palm suddenly burst into blisters. Frightened, Wu Qi threw the burning puppet away and said angrily, I haven't even taken up my post, and here it comes again. Yu Huai's face flickered slightly. With a wave of his right hand, the bone puppet let out another deep roar and grabbed the burning puppet in his hand. A plume of black smoke sprayed out of his mouth and fused with the puppet. Suddenly, the little puppet turned into a wisp of black smoke and shot out, wheeling 9 times around Wu Qi before disappearing into the void. The mansion was thrown into chaos again. Before long, the 2 black-robed oracles came in with a gloomy aura. They knelt on the ground and said in a low voice, His Excellency Meng Liang, the new disciple of Elder Yu Miao and the chief star oracle of Eastern Heaven of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong Province, was suddenly engulfed in a ghostly fire and burned into a pile of ashes. His soul is nowhere to be found. Just now, Elder Yu Miao woke up and fainted again when he learned that Yu Miao and Meng Ji were dead. Yu Huai sneered. With a wave of his hand, he dismissed the 2 oracles and said indifferently, Seems like he won't forgive me? No wonder the old bastard's son is dead. How could his disciples not be anxious? Hee, Tan Lang, don't worry. There is a great risk in this matter, but we'll give you enough rewards. In addition to what Yu Miao has promised you, we'll give you more. Wu Qi looked at Yu Huai and pondered for a long time, then nodded slowly and said, In that case, give me a storage ring with a large enough capacity, then give me enough energy stones, immortal stones, defensive bone talismans, all kinds of magical items, gold, silver, jewelry, life-saving pills, and some cultivation manuals. I believe His Excellency Yu Huai can meet these conditions, can you? Yu Huai smiled, nodded, and said, Very good. I like people who are straightforward. I'll give you whatever you want. As long as you support Yu Miao and take care of the affairs in High Province, and as long as you survive the suppression and revenge of that old bastard Yu Miao, and let them do whatever they can, you will get more when things are done. After pondering for a moment, Yu Huai smiled and said, As for the things you asked for just now, I'll take you to the secret vault later, and you can choose whatever you want. Just as he said that, the last puppet in Wu Qi's arms suddenly leaped up into the air. A snake-shaped green gas coiled around it, then opened its mouth and bit down toward it. Gu Ao's reaction was extremely fast. He grabbed the tiny puppet and casually tore the snake-shaped green gas into pieces. Then, Gu Ao's body flashed, and with a point of his finger, a bone snake burrowed into the puppet's body. Then, a miserable howl came from somewhere in the Yu residence. Wu Qi's face turned green. Looking at Yu Huai and Yu Miao, whose faces were also extremely unsightly, he said with a bitter smile, Besides, can you give me 1,000 or 800 of these life-saving puppets? Yu Miao's disciples have gone mad, and they may attack me at any time. Wu Qi's hair stood on end. The oracles of the human race had endless life-taking mystic arts, and Yu Miao's disciples had their eyes on him. He could not live a life where he could be attacked at any time. Of course, he had his own life-saving means, and the Tao of ghost and deity inherited by Princess Zhonglu was unfathomable. But, if there was room for blackmail, why not extort more good things from Yu Huai? Yu Huai gritted his teeth so hard that they made creaking noises. This is simply lawless, he snapped angrily. Grabbing Wu Qi and Yu Miao, he said in a low voice, "Come with me. We're going to father. I'll ask him for a defensive magical artifact for you and Yu Miao. Who can stand it if this goes on? I only have one son, unlike Yu Miao, who has so many vile spawns." With a sway of his body, Yu Huai rushed out of the hall with Wu Qi and Yu Miao. Chapter 582. In the main residence in the backyard of Yu Clan, Yu Miao's residence was a low and flat hall. Following Yu Huai, Wu Qi walked into the hall where Yu Miao lived, then walked along a deep corridor. Forks were opened on both sides of the corridor, with short corridors leading to various halls, such as Yu Miao's residence, quiet chambers for practicing techniques, and pill chambers for concocting pills, all of which were hidden behind these dark and oppressive corridors. At the end of the corridor was a strangely shaped palace. The circular hall was 120 feet in diameter and hundreds of feet high. There was no ceiling above it, making it look like a deep well. The walls of the hall were engraved with precise star maps. There were millions of stars the size of mung beans, and some kind of restrictive magic was used to slowly move these stars on the walls, following the trajectories of the stars in the sky. A beam of sunlight shone straight into the hall, and sparse dust could be seen dancing in the golden light. 2 large stone chairs were placed in the middle of the hall, and Yu Miao, who had changed into a spacious gray linen robe, was sitting on the chair on the left-hand side. Sitting on the chair on his right-hand side was a pretty, lovely, and youthful girl who looked to be in her late 20s. The girl was also clad in a gray linen robe. Her feet were bare, and her long hair was hanging loosely behind her back. She was fiddling with a set of jade divination sticks. Both her face and body looked very youthful, but when she looked up at Wu Qi was surprised to find that she was not young. She had a pair of beautiful eyes, which were supposed to be lively, but were motionless. Instead, they were as deep as a well, filled with an air of vicissitudes and ancientness, which made her look even older than Yu Miao. Wu Qi and Yu Miao stopped about 20 feet away from them. Yu Huai walked slowly to them, bowed, and said, "Father, mother." Wu Qi's eyelids twitched. He could not believe that this beautiful but old woman was Yu Huai's mother, Yu Miao's fiancée whom he had mentioned just now, who came from a hermit clan with the bloodline of the heavenly god. Obediently, Yu Mu dropped to his knees and kowtowed to Yu Mu and the woman. "Grandfather, grandmother." Wu Qi also lowered his head and cupped his fists at them. "I, Tan Lang, greet Grand Oracle and old mistress." The corner of Yu Mu's mouth twitched slightly as he said in a deep voice, "Well. Yu Huai, it was Bon Ao who struck just now, wasn't it? Yu Miao, Meng Liang, and Wang Xing, who had just been killed by 10,000 snakes. One of Yu Miao's sons and 2 capable disciples had died inexplicably. A group of elders are busy at the front, they haven't found the culprit yet." Yu Huai laughed darkly and said, "I'm afraid they will never find out who did it for the rest of their lives." Before his voice could fade away, Yu Huai's old mother suddenly waved her hand and gave Yu Huai a solid slap on the face. Yu Huai was knocked flying away before he could even make a grunt, smashing his head against the wall of the great hall. The old lady scolded sternly, "Why do you have to learn how to speak like those things? Humph, why did your son practice that kind of forbidden art and look like a ghost now? Is it fun?" Yu Huai laughed dryly and dared not to answer. He rose to his feet obediently, rubbed his face, and walked back cautiously. Wu Qi bowed his head, and so did Yu Miao. "Yu Miao, don't learn from your good-for-nothing father," the old lady scolded sternly. "You just forbid him from marrying a concubine, don't you? Now that he has become like this, are you trying to piss me off on purpose?" Glaring fiercely at Yu Huai, the old lady scolded, "What a good-for-nothing, just like your father. Yu Miao, if you give him 1 step, he'll take 1 step. If you give him 10 steps, he'll take 12 steps. Let's see how long you can tolerate him." Raising her head, the old lady threw the jade pendant in her hand into the air. Specks of bright light flashed, and the old lady suddenly disappeared without a trace. Wu Qi looked at Yu Huai in astonishment. His father forbade him to marry a concubine in his old age, so he practiced a forbidden art and turned himself into a skeleton. What a cruel man. Why did he feel that all the people in the Yu clan were a little ghostly, and none of them were normal? This old lady is really cruel, isn't she? Isn't her jealousy a little too strong? Your son is practicing a forbidden art, and yet you don't allow him to marry a few concubines? Yu Miao cleared his throat and said coolly, "What's the matter?" Yu Huai laughed strangely again, then suddenly covered his mouth with his hand. He glanced around to make sure that his mother had disappeared, then lowered his voice and told Wu Qi what had happened to him just now. According to what Yu Miao is doing, Tan Lang could be killed by them at any time, he whispered to Yu Miao. When that happens, Yu Miao will have no one around him to use, and our plan will not work. Yu Miao gave Wu Qi a look, then nodded slowly and said, "In that case, we do need to prepare more life-saving treasures for him. If we send out the people around us, they will have to be cautious, and it will not be good if we can't find any evidence against them." After pondering for a moment, Yu Miao rose to his feet and said indifferently, "Well, let's go to my private vault. Not only Tan Lang but also Yu Miao, you should also choose some good treasures to protect yourself. If they are anxious, what can't they do? You are my only bloodline, and if it is cut off, and your grandmother forbade me and your father from taking concubines, doesn't that mean we won't even have a descendant to worship in the future?" Accompanied by Yu Miao's slightly helpless nagging, the group of 4 came to the southeast wall of the circular hall. Yu Miao studied the slowly moving star map on the wall, then quickly pointed his right hand out, pointing at hundreds of different stars on the map with wisps of phosphorescence. His movements varied from fast to slow, light to heavy, and the phosphorescence on his fingertips flickered with different intensities. Even though Wu Qi was right behind him, staring at his movements, he could not figure out the specific secret of his movements. Yu Miao's movements were completed in a flash, and a sheet of white light suddenly burst out of the wall. The 4 of them felt their bodies lighten, and were swept into the white light. Wu Qi fixed his eyes on it, and saw a small teleportation formation behind it. It was hovering in a small kiliacosm, about 1 mile in circumference, which was created using magical power. The 4 of them flew straight into the teleportation formation, and with a strong flash of light, they were teleported to another place. This was a vast space with a circumference of over 10 million miles. It was pitch black in all directions, and there was only a small continent floating in the air. Hundreds of thousands of wooden shelves and tables were piled up on the smooth and flat continent, on which a large number of rare treasures were placed, sparkling with different colors. Yu Miao turned to Yu Huai and said, "You've been here a few times, but this is my first time here. Explain to him what this place is." Without further ado, Yu Huai explained the origin of this space to Wu Qi and Yu Miao. Many eons ago, one of the ancestors of Yu Miao's branch had reached the realm of primordial immortal by cultivating the true body of heaven and earth scripture. Before his death, he imitated the great Saint Pangu in creating the world by exploding his body, creating this alternate dimension that could exist eternally without being destroyed by any external force for his descendants. Every year, this tens of millions of miles in circumference produced some extremely rare and precious natural treasures, and it was also the safest private vault in the world. Unless he was led by a descendant of Yu clan who carried the bloodline of Yu Miao and had a strong enough cultivation base to protect him, those who trespassed into this void like Wu Qi would be wiped out by the power of the space. It was as strong as fighting an expert of primordial immortal head-on, and any ordinary person who trespassed into this place by mistake would end up with his soul disintegrated immediately. Wu Qi felt a chill run down his spine. This private vault was not only a good place to keep treasures, but also a deadly trap. Why did Yu Miao bring me here? Is he trying to show off the profound resources of his clan so that I can support Yu Miao with all my strength? That must be it. Otherwise, even if Yu Miao wants to give me some treasures, he would not bring me to such a top-secret place of the clan. Yu Miao, on the other hand, was dancing with excitement. The fact that this small void was created by his direct ancestor made him very excited. Yu Miao did not let Wu Qi and Yu Miao enter the small continent, which measured about 10,000 miles in both width and length. Instead, he waved his hand at it, and a few items flew up into the sky amidst various glows. He handed a set of bone armor made of spirit bones to Yu Huai, asking him to refine it to protect himself, and a set of bone armor and a few magical items to Yu Miao, asking him to refine them carefully as a life-saving measure. What he gave Wu Qi was a storage ring with a strange design, which was a large serpent with its head and tail joined together, a fist-sized, pitch-black pearl that was shrouded in countless clouds and mists, and one could vaguely see countless mountains, rivers, towns, and people, and a palm-sized jade slip. Inside the storage ring were the energy stones, immortal stones, and various natural treasures that Wu Qi asked for. Inside the jade slip was a set of cultivation techniques practiced by the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials, as well as the complete set of the true body of heaven and earth scripture. What Yu Miao meant was that since Wu Qi was a 100-man lieutenant in the Directorate of Celestials of Anlu County, he could not possibly have the complete set of the true body of heaven and earth scripture. Therefore, he gave Wu Qi the complete set of cultivation techniques, which were strictly controlled by Yu. Yu Miao wanted to try his luck and see if Wu Qi had the aptitude to cultivate both the true body of heaven and earth scripture and the various mystic arts of the oracles at the same time. If Wu Qi could cultivate the mystic arts of the oracles, Yu Miao would have a powerful and talented helper. If Wu Qi did not have the aptitude to cultivate the mystic arts of the oracles, then with the complete set of the true body of heaven and earth scripture, Wu Qi's future progress would not be slow. Of all the items, the most valuable one was the black orb. It was condensed from all the Shin energy of a spirit Shin that had lived for countless eons. After being refined by the seniors of the Yu clan, it had a very strong defense against all kinds of curses of the human race. On top of that, it also had the wonderful function of deceiving others, concealing one's aura, and hiding the secrets of the heavens. It was truly an auxiliary treasure. However, the cultivation technique practiced by Yu Miao's clan focused more on frontal attacks. Even if the enemy attacked them with curses, they would habitually fight back with stronger and more violent curses. Therefore, they did not attach much importance to a magical artifact that could evade attacks such as the Spirit Shin Pearl. Therefore, it had fallen into Wu Qi's hands today. After listening to Yu Miao's explanation, Wu Qi was overjoyed. He quickly followed Yu Miao's instruction and dripped a drop of blood on the pearl. A plume of smoke rushed out of the spirit clam dark pearl and enveloped Wu Qi entirely. Chapter 583. Countless illusions flashed in front of Wu Qi's eyes. It came from an ancient Mi Shen who had lived for an unknown number of years. At its peak, its huge body could even cover a dozen outer heavenly realms. The Shen energy it unleashed could even make top-grade gold immortals lose themselves in it. But it was, after all, a low-level life form that survived by instinct. When it encountered the ancestor of Yu clan, who was an expert in manipulating souls and lives, it was killed. All the Shen energy had condensed into this spirit Shin bead, and Wu Qi's blood was fused into it. Relying on the secret incantation of Yu clan, he was able to fill his body with Shin energy and offset most of the curse attacks. The miraculous thing about the Shin energy was that it could simulate a complete world. Therefore, those curses that were launched at Wu Qi might have killed someone in the miraculous energy, but could not hurt Wu Qi. For Yu's oracles, the spirit Shin bead had a very strong restraining function. If it were not for the fact that Wu Qi was Yu Miao's strongest helper, and that Yu Miao needed Wu Qi to help him get through this period of tempering, he would not have given the spirit clam pearl to Wu Qi. Wu Qi's consciousness traveled through the endless world of the spirit Shin bead, passing through countless mountains and rivers, countless towns and villages, and countless cycles of life and death. At last, he came to the core of the spirit Shin bead. A blood-red light, thousands of miles long and 1,000 feet thick, was wriggling slowly in the core of the spirit Shin bead, emitting an astonishingly strong aura of life. Wu Qi breathed out a deep sigh and stared blankly at the huge beam of blood-red light. The slain immemorial enchanting hag had used up all its energy, essence, and spirit to form a bloodline of immemorial enchanting hag. The bloodline of an ancient Mishun? It was a terrible creature with many strange divine abilities and innate talents. When Wu Qi thought of the description of an ancient Mishun in the Scroll of Stealing, he could not help but smile happily. Opening his mouth, Wu Qi swallowed the spirit Shen bead along with all the smoke. Noiselessly, the enormous bloodline merged into Wu Qi's body and was gradually refined by the chaotic energy. With the help of the 7 foundation elevating technique, Wu Qi quickly merged with the bloodline of the primordial mist Ho. He now had the ability to transform into the primordial mist Ho and use the innate ability of the primordial mist Ho. Faint smoke about 10 feet thick rose from his body as he cupped his fist and smiled at Yu Miao, Yu Huai, and Yu Mu. Suddenly, a few Wu Qis appeared around him, all of whom looked exactly like him, and even their auras were exactly the same. Laughing, Yu Mu clapped his hands and praised, "This is indeed the primordial Shen Pearl. It is indeed amazing. This treasure is useless to us, and its Shen energy will only interfere with our communication with the ghosts and deities of heaven and earth. But it is the best to protect ourselves." Yu Huai laughed evilly as a bone sword shot out of his fingertip, wheeling 9 times around Wu Qi in the air, then suddenly shot a beam of phosphorescence at Wu Qi. A miserable howl rang out as a figure next to Wu Qi suddenly burst into flames and was burned to ashes in the blink of an eye. But Wu Qi himself was not harmed. Only a wisp of his hair suddenly burst into a phosphorescence, which was quickly put out by Wu Qi with a backhand. "Amazing, amazing beyond words." Yu Huai nodded and said, "It is indeed a powerful defensive weapon, Tan Lang. With this, you no longer need to fear their revenge. Unless that old fool Yu Miao puts down his pride and attacks you personally." Yu Mu smiled sinisterly, then shook his head and said, "He won't have the chance to do so. With me holding him back, if he dares to attack Tan Lang or Yu Miao in Zhongning City, don't blame me for taking the opportunity to break his altar and destroy his Yuan Ling, so that he can no longer communicate with the ancestor god he worships, and completely destroy everything he has." Clenching his fists tightly, Yu Mu threw his head back and cried out in a low voice, "I've tolerated him for so many years, step by step, step by step. I've tolerated him, I've retreated, and I've given in. This is a great opportunity. I must let Yu Miao know that he is nothing in front of me. The Yu clan of Zhong province? Either you obediently bow your head and listen to my orders, or—" Yu Mu's eyes flickered with a green gleam, and the boundless killing intent emanating from them made Wu Qi frown. Wu Qi was surprised that Yu Mu had such a vicious killing intent against the people of the Yu clan of Zhong province, who represented Yu Miao. However, this was the internal feud of the Yu clan, and it had nothing to do with Wu Qi. He just needed to wait for Yu Miao to go to High Province, and then he could develop his own power there. After leaving Yu Miao's secret storehouse and waiting for another day, the instructions of the new prefecture overseer of Zhong province, Bo Zhongfu, were delivered to Yu clan. Bo Zhongfu spoke highly of the 30 prefecture overseers selected by Yu clan this time, saying that each of them was an elite of Yu, and that they would be able to rule the land and bring benefits to the people. His comments were nothing more than a bunch of gobbledygook, and no one took them seriously. But, since Bo Zhongfu had made a friendly gesture, Yu Miao returned the favor. He brought the 30 newly selected prefecture overseers and the elders to the prefecture overseer mansion to meet the new prefecture overseer and expressed his determination to make the 300 provinces ruled by Zhong province prosper under Bo Zhongfu's leadership. It was also some officialese, and no one took it seriously. But it had to be done according to the etiquette. All the officials in Zhong province knew very well that the Yu clan led by Yu Miao had stabbed the former prefecture overseer, Feng Lingling, in order to gain the administrative power of the 30 provinces. It was hard to say whether Yu clan would stab Bo Zhongfu in the future. The power of the 30 provinces was only used by Bo Zhongfu to win over Yu clan. To put it bluntly, the control of the 30 provinces was no longer in the hands of Bo Zhongfu, the prefecture overseer, but belonged to Yu clan. Therefore, Although Bo Zhongfu was very enthusiastic about the 30 new prefecture overseers selected by Yu Clan, he was not enthusiastic about them. After putting on a show and putting on a good show, the matter was finally settled. After the new prefecture overseer took office, Bo Zhongfu was busy purging the officials and aristocratic clans in Zhong province and installing the members of the many vassal clans he had brought with him. Therefore, after a hasty banquet to entertain the people of Yu Clan, they returned home. The next night, Yu Clan closed their doors and held a grand banquet to celebrate the rich benefits they had gained this time. At the same time, it was also a farewell wine for the 30 new prefecture overseers, including Yu Miao. Wu Qi and Yu Miao took a bath and changed their clothes, putting on gorgeous robes and expensive jade ornaments. Then, accompanied by a large group of servants and maidservants, they came to the great hall where Yu Clan held their grand banquets. Unlike the somber and imposing dueling arena in the main hall, the great hall where Yu Clan held their grand banquets was extraordinarily luxurious. The floor, walls, and ceiling of the spacious hall were paved with the hearts of 10,000-year-old dragon scale pines, carved with countless gorgeous patterns of exotic flowers and plants. The hall was also decorated with countless bronze ornaments, including bells, cauldrons, stoves, boxes, and even the tables and utensils used for the banquets. The hall was brightly lit, and a fragrant mist filled the air. As the guests walked into the hall, they saw a large group of dancers dancing wildly in the middle of the hall. Such an extravagant scene was extremely rare in the conservative and traditional De Yu clan. If it were not for an important celebration worthy of the clan's celebration, this hall, which was completely different from the style of De Yu clan, would not have been used, and the dancers would not have been used to create such a scene of extravagance and wealth. There were not many people who were qualified to attend the banquet. Yu Mu and Yu Mu sat on the main seat of honor, while 6 rows of long tables were placed below them, each of which had 10 seats. Coincidentally, each of the newly appointed prefecture overseer and his most capable retainer had a seat. Led by the maidservants, the guests were seated according to the age of the sons of Yu clan. Then, a bell rang, and all the dancers retreated, leaving the hall in a state of silence. Sitting next to Yu Miao, Wu Qi looked coldly at Yu Miao on the high platform. The old fellow was nearly killed by Wu Qi's punches and kicks, and several dozens of his bones were broken. But in just over a day, his injuries had fully recovered, and he looked as if nothing had happened. He sat next to Yu Miao with an expressionless face, glancing at Wu Qi and Yu Miao with a pair of glinting green eyes, intentionally or unintentionally. When he saw Wu Qi looking at him, Yu Miao smiled and nodded at Wu Qi, looking very amiable. Wu Qi was laughing in his mind. What was Yu Miao trying to say with that smile? His son and 2 proud disciples were indirectly killed by Wu Qi, and now he wished he could tear Wu Qi to pieces. But he was putting on such an amiable face. It was too hypocritical of him. But Wu Qi did not take Yu Miao seriously. Since Yu Miao had promised to let him restrain Yu Miao, he did not have to worry about him anymore. As for Yu Miao's sons and disciples, Wu Qi's cultivation base had skyrocketed, and he was protected by the spirit puppet pearl. Who was he afraid of? Picking up the wine vessel, Wu Qi toasted Yu Miao from a distance, then finished the wine with a smile on his face. Yu Miao's face suddenly turned extremely unsightly, as if a slate had been piled on it, and he bowed his head with great resentment. Yu Miao had noticed Yu Miao and Wu Qi's little trick, but he pretended not to see it. He just raised a few requests to the many sons of Yu clan below the platform, and said some high-sounding words. Wu Qi did not bother to remember those high-sounding words, but Yu Miao's requests were real. First, he wanted the 30 prefecture overseers of Yu clan to go to their respective territories and work hard to multiply the population within 10 years. The population represented the military strength, the number of fertile lands, mines, fisheries, and forest farms, as well as the amount of supplies that could be provided to Yu clan. Second, they had to reorganize their armaments to prevent itinerant immortals from spreading their influence in their territories. Yu Miao sternly warned Yu Huai, Yu Mu, and the other prefecture overseers of Yu clan that if itinerant immortals appeared in any of their territories, they must be eradicated with the force of thunder, and they must not be allowed to grow stronger. This was related to the evaluation of the prefecture overseers conducted by the Yu dynasty every 10 years, so it was very important and could not be neglected. Third, the prefecture overseers must help each other and turn these 30 provinces into Yu clan's impregnable territory, so they must not be taken advantage of by outsiders. The third request was vague, but it was very clear. In short, this territory would be Yu clan's private land in the future, and no outsider would be allowed to touch it. If any officials or aristocratic clans in the territory dared to collude with outsiders, they would be killed without exception. Apart from these 3 requests, the other miscellaneous things were not very important. It was nothing more than the amount of manpower, resources, and money that the Yu clan of Zhong province would provide to each new prefecture overseer. Wu Qi was not interested in these things, so he just drank to his heart's content. The banquet went smoothly, and Yu Zong did not give Wu Qi any trouble during the banquet. Soon, it was time for everyone to set out. After staying in Yu clan for 3 days, the 30 newly appointed prefecture overseers of Yu clan set off on an auspicious day. Chapter 584. It was noon. 30 snake-shaped flying ships, each about a mile long, were hovering tens of feet above the ground in the square in front of the main hall of Yu clan's mansion. Yu Huai, Yu Mu, and the other 30 newly appointed prefecture overseers of Yu clan were standing in front of the ships with a large group of retinues, dressed in luxurious clothes, quietly looking at the dozens of elders who were dancing around the altar in front of the main entrance of the hall. A chilly wind was blowing from the altar, making the originally sunny noon feel like a graveyard in the middle of the night, making one's hair stand on end for no reason. Some vague shadows were hovering over the altar, with faint light and shadows spreading out from them and gradually injecting into the bodies of Yu Huai, Yu Mu, and the other sons of Yu clan. A few days ago, Yu clan had selected 30 prefecture overseers through a duel. The death of nearly 6,000 lower-grade oracles and warriors had brought great joy to the ghosts and deities worshipped by the clan, who had bestowed them with great power. Unfortunately, half of the power was monopolized by Wu Qi, which had allowed his cultivation base of the true body of heaven and earth scripture to soar to the peak of the 9 stars realm of the first Panga heaven. Yu Mu and the other sons of Yu clan had shared the remaining half of the power with their most capable assistants, but the result was that their cultivation base had only improved slightly, not even by a tier. With the cultivation base of Yu Mu and the other young sons of Yu clan, it was too much for them to take control of a province. Therefore, when they officially set off for their own territories, the elders of Yu clan had no choice but to spend their hard-earned capital again to hold a large-scale sacrificial ceremony to give their sons a little more confidence. In the last duel, the lives of 6,000 lower-grade oracles and warriors were sacrificed in exchange for the great joy of the ghosts and deities. But it was impossible for Yu clan to keep sacrificing lower-grade oracles and warriors indefinitely. In the last duel, the sons of Yu clan had promised these oracles and warriors with great benefits, and no one could say anything even if they were killed or wounded. But this time, it was clear that Yu clan had taken the initiative to offer sacrifices. If they continued to act so unscrupulously, they might get into great trouble. Therefore, for this sacrificial ceremony, Yu clan had slaughtered 30,000 black goats, 30,000 white horses, 30,000 green oxen, and countless other sacrifices in front of the great hall. The massacre had started before dawn, and it had been going on for 8 to 10 hours. Fortunately, Yu clan owned a large ranch outside of Zhongning City, where they kept countless livestock. Although such a huge amount of sacrificial offerings could not compare to the joy brought to these ghosts and deities by the souls and blood of 6,000 oracles and warriors, the difference was not too great. More and more ghosts and deities appeared on the altar. Although the sun was scorching high up in the sky and the ghosts and deities did not like sunlight, the smell of blood sacrifice was so strong that these ghosts and deities had no choice but to sneak out from the world where they lived. They crazily snatched the spirit blood and souls of the slaughtered livestock. A great amount of blood flew high up into the sky, along with countless souls of livestock in the shape of beasts. All of them were sucked into the mouths of the ghosts and deities. In front of the main hall, not a single drop of blood was left. All the blood had entered the mouth of the ghost god. But, perhaps because of the blood sacrifice a few days ago, the blood and souls of the oracles and warriors had won the favor of these ghosts and deities. Therefore, even though so many livestock had been slaughtered, and the soldiers who were responsible for bringing the livestock to the altar were panting with exhaustion, the ghosts and deities still did not show the slightest look of satisfaction. Yu Miao, who was presiding over the sacrificial ceremony on the altar, could not help but have his expression change slightly when he saw this. Gritting his teeth, he cried out in a low voice, "Bring those sacrifices up here. Kill them quickly and cremate their bodies." As his order rang out, large groups of soldiers rushed out from a few nearby side palaces. Like wolves and tigers, they escorted about 4,000 men and women in ragged clothes and panic-stricken faces. Not allowing these men and women to resist, they were pushed onto the altar by the armored soldiers. Steel blades whistled down, chopping off their heads one by one. "How dare you! The human emperor has repeatedly ordered that blood sacrifice is strictly prohibited. You!" A few old men screamed at the top of their lungs. Before they could finish their words, Yu Miao had rushed up and crushed their hearts with his palm. Yu Miao licked the blood on his hand and gave Wu Qi a sinister look. "The human emperor's ban?" he said in a low voice, laughing. "What makes you, who are exiled for violating the human emperor's decree, qualified to talk about the human emperor's ban?" The 4,000 men and women were killed in batches. Their blood and souls immediately soared into the sky and were devoured by the ghosts and deities hovering over the altar. Although the blood and souls of the 4,000 men and women were not as strong and delicious as those of the 6,000 oracles and warriors, they were, after all, living people. Coupled with the hundreds of thousands of livestock in front of them, the ghosts and deities immediately smiled contentedly. A great sheet of blood-red light condensed on the bodies of these ghosts and deities. Accompanied by the joyful laughter of Yu Miao and the other elders of Yu clan, the blood-red light split into 30 beams and injected into the bodies of 30 new prefecture overseers of Yu clan. Wu Qi twitched his mouth and thought to himself, "These stingy old fellows." In the blood sacrifice a few days ago, Wu Qi had gained a great advantage. For today's blood sacrifice, fearing that something out of their control would happen, the elders of Yu clan had used a mystic art to select the candidates who would receive the blessings of the ghosts and deities. All the powers were divided equally into 30 portions, and only the sons of Yu clan could enjoy such treatment. Standing next to Wu Qi, the energy in Yu He's body grew stronger rapidly. His eyes flickered with a blood-red light, and suddenly, a gray flame burst out of his body. Wu Qi sensed that Yu He's strength had improved to roughly the same realm as a 16th-tier heaven immortal. That was to say, he was now a 5-moon-tier oracle, which was 2 months higher than his previous level. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath, then looked at Yu Zong and said in a low voice, "If one day, Yu clan captures several 100,000 people alive, slaughters them all at once, and offers them as sacrifices, doesn't that mean they can produce a primordial immortal?" Yu He was enjoying the wonderful pleasure brought by the rapid improvement of his strength when he suddenly heard Wu Qi's question. He glared back at Wu Qi and said, "If that is the case, the Yu clan of Zhong province will be wiped out in an instant, and it will not be the work of a human emperor." After a brief pause, he continued in a low voice, "The blood sacrifice technique has its limitations. The higher one's cultivation base is, the less benefit he will get. At most, it can only bring him to the realm of gold immortal. Only an ancient ghost or deity like His Excellency Bon Ao can offer him a huge blood-stained formation as a sacrifice. But the risk is too great." Wu Qi wanted to ask what the risk was, but Yu He shook his head and seemed unwilling to discuss the topic. Wu Qi could only shrug and put the question to the back of his mind. No matter what the risk was, it had nothing to do with him, Wu Qi. Those ghosts and deities had taught Wu Qi the steps of the blood sacrifice ritual, but how could Wu Qi kill civilians for no reason? He wondered if they would accept the immortal souls and immortal blood of those immortals. Suddenly, a very strange thought came to Wu Qi's mind. "High Province, Mount Moon Gazing, Reverend Yao Yu." According to Zhang Lu, he seemed to have many descendants and relatives, and all of them were immortal cultivators. A fierce gleam flashed in Wu Qi's eyes. It made Yu Mu, who was standing next to him, tremble and his heart twitch violently. After a long time of work, the ghosts and deities finally released the blood-stained light. As Yu Mu let out a loud roar, all the elders of Yu clan stood panting in front of the great hall. Even with their profound cultivation bases, they had consumed almost all their strength after presiding over the sacrificial ritual for such a long time. Some of the old and frail elders even fell to the ground, sweating profusely and almost unable to stand up. Yu Mu gently waved his hand and cried out in a low voice, "All right, no need to talk nonsense. Let's go now. When we arrive at your territory, take control of all the power as soon as possible. This is the first test the clan has for you. We all know who has done well and who has not done well." All the sons of Yu clan knelt down and bowed to the elders in front of the great hall. Then, amidst the envious, jealous, and even hateful gazes of the members of Yu clan, the 30 new prefecture overseers of the Yu dynasty boarded the flying ships with their retinues. A continuous ringing of bells rang out in the great hall of Yu clan. Amidst the sonorous ringing that reached into the clouds, 30 flying ships in the shape of snakes and painted turquoise soared into the sky, bringing with them a gust of strong wind as they sped away in all directions. As the controllers of the flying ships performed various incantation gestures at the core of the ships, the ferocious snakehead on the prow of the ships slowly opened and shot out a beam of pale green fluorescence. The void in front of them rippled abruptly, and in the blink of an eye, the ships disappeared without a trace as if they had plunged into a stream of water. This was the unique function of the high-grade flying ships of the Yu dynasty, which was close to the teleportation of immortals. The 1-mile-long flying ship twisted the void and flew forward with nearly 1,000 people on board. Just the moment this function was activated, 1,000 lower-grade immortal stones would be burned. An enormous force enveloped the entire ship. Standing on the deck, Wu Qi and the others watched as streams of light danced and darted around them at top speed. It might have been a few days, a few hours, or just a few quarters of an hour, but the flying ship abruptly shot out of the void. A small city with beautiful scenery on the shore of the ocean appeared in front of them. The city was less than 10 miles in both width and length, completely incomparable to a magnificent city like Zhongning City. In the square in the center of the city, a group of officials clad in long black robes and several hundred armored soldiers were waiting quietly with their heads facing the sky. This was Ningbo City, the capital city of Hai Province, a 9th-grade province under the rule of the Yu dynasty. Every province of the Yu dynasty had a territory of the same size. Just like Zhong Province, Hai Province covered a circumference of 10 billion miles and was extremely rich in natural resources. However, Hai Province had been established less than 1,000 years ago, and its population was less than 1/10,000th of Zhong Province. It was a sparsely populated province. With a total population of more than 1 million, Ningbo City was the largest city in Hai Province, and it had 500 armored soldiers. Amidst a stream of green light, the flying ship hovered silently over Ningbo City. Yu Miao burst into a deafening laughter. Shrouded in raging gray flames, he stepped out of the ship's deck and descended. Wu Qi, together with Yu Miao and over 1,000 of his retinue, jumped off the deck at the same time. Intentionally or unintentionally, all of them had raised their strength to the maximum. The tremendous pressure emanating from them made all the officials and armored soldiers in the square fall to their knees and cry out in unison, "Your subordinates welcome your excellency, prefecture overseer." Yu Miao burst into laughter. "Somebody! Kill Mu Hai, the minister of agriculture of Hai Province." He cried out at the top of his voice even before he landed on the ground. The officials of Hai Province who were welcoming Yu Miao were horrified. Chapter 585. A fiend shadow streaked across the land, crossing hundreds of thousands of miles in just a few flashes. After several hours of arduous traveling, The fiend's shadow finally arrived at Mount Picking Star in an E county, then went straight to the main peak. Before the fiend's shadow, large patches of clouds emerged from valleys and crevices, blocking his way. But as the fiend's shadow performed a few incantation gestures, all the clouds slid to both sides, revealing a path that led straight to the main peak. After a few leaps, the fiend's shadow landed on the platform in front of the underhand sex cave abode. The skin of the fiend's shadow was slightly bronze, and he looked exactly like Wu Qi. He was the celestial fiend puppet Wu Qi had sent out from Zhongning City. At this time, the platform was already covered in verdant trees, and exotic flowers and plants were spread among the spirit trees. A few waterfalls flowed down from the top of the cliff, and the continuous water vapor nourished the moss on the platform, making it especially plump. The flowers, plants, and various spirit herbs attached to the moss were also full of vitality, swaying gently with the breeze. On the edge of the platform, on a cluster of huge pine trees that stretched out in all directions like dragons, an exquisite wooden hut was hanging on one of the branches, swaying gently in the breeze. Beiji, who was sitting cross-legged on the balcony of the wooden hut with a monk's blade in his hand, silently exercising a Zen technique to refine the blade, suddenly opened his eyes. A golden gleam flashed in his eyes as he turned to look at the celestial fiend puppet. Laughing foolishly, Beiji sprung up from the ground, swinging his blade and flying towards the celestial fiend puppet. He dropped to his knees, kowtowed to the puppet and said, "Disciple offers greetings, Master. Is Master doing well out there?" The puppet pressed his palm on Beiji's body and sensed the pure and powerful Zen power in his body. Nodding satisfyingly, he said, "Good, it seems you did not waste your time. Work harder. You have the fortune from your previous life, so try to form your relic lotus throne as soon as possible in this life, and become a gold arhat as soon as possible. I still have many things that I need your help with." The celestial fiend puppet let out a strange laugh. Wu Qi, who was controlling this celestial fiend puppet, suddenly thought of something very interesting. When it came to developing power in private and controlling the hearts and minds of the people in the territory, who could do a better job than these Buddhist monks? Wu Qi did not mind the underhand sect gaining another group of bald disciples. He had already taken in so many demons, why would he care about a group of monks? A few young disciples clad in green Taoist robes came out to greet them. When they saw the celestial fiend puppets, they bowed deeply and cupped their fists, calling him ancestral master. A cold gleam flashed across the puppet's eyes. In just a short period of time, these young disciples had gained the cultivation base of Hotian realm, which was equivalent to dozens of years of cultivation base. Very good, very good. He could tell that Supremacy 3 Flame and Eugene had spent a lot of time and effort on these young men, and Pangu Continent was a perfect place for cultivators to cultivate. The celestial fiend puppet nodded cheerfully and asked these young disciples to rise to their feet, then strode into the cave. As soon as he entered the cave abode, he heard deafening battle cries, and saw a flying dragon flying high up in the sky. It was none other than Lord Xianxing. Below him, over 1,200 little aquatic demons from Qianzhang Lake had formed a battle formation, divided into 3 groups, attacking and killing each other. These little demons did not have any good weapons, and they did not have any powerful divine abilities or magical spells. However, they had a strict formation when they attacked and retreated. All the weapons and water thunders landed squarely on each other's bodies, causing some of them to vomit blood and retreat from the battle formation. Eugene led nearly 100 young disciples and guarded the side of the battle formation. Whenever there was an injured and retreated small demon beasts, he would immediately lead those young disciples to greet them. Using these small demon beasts as props, he would explain to those young disciples where these small demon beasts were injured, how serious their injuries were, how to treat their injuries, how to bandage them, and how to give them medicinal pills, etc. Wu Qi had taught Eugene the Tao of alchemy. As he was very interested in the Tao of alchemy, when he was not cultivating, he would devote all his attention to the Tao of alchemy. The nearly 100 young disciples he brought with him were carefully selected by him, as they were all interested in the Tao of alchemy. A true immortal sect must be self-sufficient. No matter it was artifact crafting, pill concocting, talismans, formations, or many other things, they all needed to be taken care of by specialized people. With this group of disciples led by Eugene, at least in the future, Underhand sect would not have to worry about the supply of medicinal pills. Wu Qi had some excellent immortal pills and spirit pills, which would be enough for Eugene and the others to study for a long time. Without alerting Lord Xianxing, Eugene, and the others, the celestial fiend puppet flew straight down to the cave abode a few levels below. In the second level of the cave abode, Supremacy 3 Flame was supervising the cultivation of many Underhand sect's disciples. More or less, the little demons in Qianzhang Lake had the cultivation base of Jin Dan, while the strongest among these disciples only had the overall strength of 2 or 3 peak stage Hotian realm. For a sect, such overall strength was too weak. Supremacy 3 Flame was a man who valued loyalty the most. Since Wu Qi had made him an elder of Underhand sect, he had to fulfill his responsibility as an elder. Therefore, under the situation where Wu Qi did not want to do anything, and the others were not reliable, Supremacy 3 Flame took on the heavy responsibility of teaching the Tao. The celestial fiend puppet gave Supremacy 3 Flame a look, who was sitting cross-legged on the platform and teaching the Tao to the disciples of Underhand sect. Then, with a sway of his body, he continued to fly down to the cave abode a few levels below. In the third level of the cave abode, Xue Mei was having a sword match with Qianzhang Dragon King. Qianzhang Dragon King had cultivated painstakingly for tens of thousands of years, and had barely obtained the body of a flood dragon of the lowest grade. Currently, he had merely stepped into the realm of nascent divinity. Although Xue Mei's cultivation base was not as strong as Qianzhang Dragon King, the difference was not too great. Furthermore, the various flying swords and magical treasures she possessed were extraordinary, which made it a draw for her to fight Qianzhang Dragon King. Both of them were practicing sword techniques. Xue Mei was seriously discussing the technique of sword controlling with Qianzhang Dragon King, while Qianzhang Dragon King was listening attentively to her teachings and explanations. It was a rare opportunity for Qianzhang Dragon King, who had always cultivated alone, to have such a systematic learning of a mystic technique. Therefore, he had devoted all his attention to the discussion with Xue Mei. As for the over 1,000 little demons under his command, he had left them all to Lord Xianxing to deal with. In the fourth layer of the cave abode, the first few layers were thriving, and everyone was working hard to improve themselves. But in the fourth layer of the cave abode, it made the celestial fiend puppet stagger and nearly fall to the ground. Wu Qi, who was controlling the puppet from a distance, clenched his jaws in anger. Why are these few things so disappointing? He thought to himself. The vast cave abode was covered with fine grasses, and exotic flowers and spirit herbs could be seen everywhere. In the middle of the cave, on top of the spirit cave, where the immortal energy was the richest, 3 huge wolf-like creatures were lying on the ground, chewing something with saliva flying in all directions. Catfish, who measured 3 miles long, and Goldhorn and Silverhorn, who measured several thousand feet long, were lying lazily with their bellies facing the sky, comfortably closing their eyes as they ate and drank to their heart's content. Next to them, a few young disciples of Underhand sect were running back and forth, sweating profusely as they fed one wild animal after another into their mouths. There were also a few little aquatic demons, who were pitifully carrying large wine jars with bamboo sticks, pouring one after another fine wine into the trio's wide-open mouths. What made Wu Qi feel helpless was that although these 3 fellows were so lazy and focused on eating and drinking, the immortal energy in this place was simply too rich. Just by relying on their fleshly bodies to absorb the immortal energy instinctively, their cultivation speed was much faster than the cultivators in the outside world who were cultivating wholeheartedly. The blessed land of immortals found by Wu Qi from the copy of Panga's map was simply too good, so good that these 3 fellows had lost the motivation to cultivate. Shaking his head and sighing helplessly, Wu Qi did not pay any attention to them. He just took it as they were cultivating as well. The celestial fiend puppet's body flickered as he quickly descended. The few levels of the cave abode below were sparsely built with special storerooms, pill chambers, and other similar rooms. Some of the disciples of Underhand sect were either checking the immortal herbs and spirit herbs they had collected recently, or trying to concoct some of the most basic medicinal pills, such as marching powder or gold sore medicine. All these disciples were very attentive and serious, which made Wu Qi very happy. Obviously, it was because of Supremacy 3 Flame and Eugene that these disciples were able to perform so well. As for the others, they could forget about it. The Underhand sect still needed a group of talented people to manage internal affairs. Otherwise, Supremacy 3 Flame and Eugene would not be able to manage such a large sect even if they were exhausted. Instinctively, Wu Qi thought of the group of people from Luo clan. At least, as a clan of cultivators, Luo clan had the ability to manage their business. It would be beneficial for him to transfer a few people from Luo clan to help him manage the affairs here. While pondering some plans for the development of the sect, the celestial fiend puppet went down to the 18th level of the cave abode. The golden-purple immortal energy was rocking and rolling rapidly in the spacious cave abode. Princess Zhonglu was hovering in midair, emitting a strong 5-colored divine light as she kept absorbing the immortal energy into her body. Beside her, Peppermint and Angelica were carefully exercising the dark Yin water scripture. Princess Zhonglu was constantly dividing the immortal energy into wisps of pitch-black water essence, injecting them into the sisters' bodies. With the help of Princess Zhonglu, the speed of their cultivation was much faster than ordinary people. Even Lady Dark Goldwater did not have someone like Princess Zhonglu to help her break down the immortal energy and transform it into water essence for her cultivation. Sensing that the celestial fiend puppet had entered the cave abode, Princess Zhonglu opened her eyes slowly, frowned, and twitched her lips at the puppet as she said, "I feel like smashing these metal lumps to pieces when I see them. Why didn't you come back yourself? I've been missing you for the past few days." Yu Miao has successfully taken over the power of High Province's prefecture overseer, said the puppet in a hoarse voice. "What do you think we should do next?" Princess Zhonglu was overjoyed when she heard that. She jumped to her feet and said with a smile, "Oh? Doesn't that mean we can start planning to invade High Province? How can we take over Yu Miao's power and put High Province in our hands?" Wu Qi broke into a sweat when he heard that. He was only thinking about the land promised to him in High Province, but Princess Zhonglu was actually planning to take over the entire High Province. Was this the difference between a princess and a commoner? Then he heard Princess Zhonglu saying, since we're going to take over High Province, we'll have to find a way to plant our people in an E-county as well. Peppermint, send a message to Yen Bugui and ask old Mr. Su Qin to come with us. We need to plan carefully." While Princess Zhonglu was busy making all sorts of plans, the celestial fiend puppet was standing idly off to the side. Wu Qi had also released his control over him. It seemed to be a good thing to have a wife who was too capable and too strong. When Wu Qi released his control over the puppet, it was Yu Miao who brazenly ordered Mu Hai to be killed. The atmosphere in Ningbo City suddenly tensed up. Chapter 586. The Minister of Agriculture of High Province, Mu Hai, was a skinny old man with a goatee on his face. The most eye-catching feature of the old man was the jade finger glove on his left little finger, glinting with a bright green light. Tiny runes could be seen on it, and from time to time, a cold gleam could be seen flashing from the sharp tip of the glove. Clearly, it was a magical artifact with extraordinary power. Apart from the former prefecture overseer, who had fled with his seal, those who remained in Ningbo City were neutral people who had little to do with the former prefecture overseer and thought their lives would not be in danger. When they heard Yu Miao's order to capture and kill Mu Hai, all the officials in Ningbo City shuddered and turned to look at Yu Miao in horror. Mu Hai jumped to his feet, his face turning pale with fright as he waved his hands wildly and screamed, "Your Excellency Prefecture Overseer, what crime have I committed? What crime have I committed? I have always been cautious and conscientious, and I have never made any mistakes." A cold gleam flashed across Yu Miao's eyes. Grinning coldly, he shook his head and said, "Never made any mistakes? 3 years ago, the pioneering team you led found a 9 Hearts Jadebone Fragrant Wood, on a nameless mountain. Where did the 9 Hearts Jadebone Spirit Mending Grass growing on it go? Mu Hai's body trembled and froze on the spot. Yu Miao's body was shrouded in a grayish-white flame that had no temperature as he slowly landed on the ground. The square was paved with a thick layer of black boulders. As soon as he landed, the boulders under his feet gave off a faint crackling noise, turning into a lifeless grayish-white color. Gradually, they began to collapse. As a breeze blew past, the dust on the boulders was blown away, leaving behind a deep pit that was about a foot deep. The information about the 9 Hearts Jadebone Fragrant Wood and the 9 Hearts Jadebone Spirit Mending Grass quickly flashed through Wu Qi's mind. 9 Hearts Jadebone Fragrant Shade Wood was a top-grade material for crafting. Even a peak-stage first-tier Heaven Immortal could use it to craft all sorts of miraculous items. Although they were all auxiliary items, they were extremely valuable. The elixir box made of it could preserve the power of the elixir to the greatest extent. If the elixir was stored in the box all year round, it could even allow the elixir to nourish the internal organs and restore the immortal soul. This effect was extremely valuable. If it fell into the hands of those fiend immortals or demon immortals, those immortals who cultivated in the art of poisonous goo could use it to make a bug disc, allowing all kinds of poisonous plants to fuse into the poisonous goo, giving it endless changes and power. Apart from that, the 9-hearted Jadebone Fragrant Wood could also be used as a supplementary material for various offensive magic treasures, especially for thunder, fire, and wind magic treasures. It was not a lot, and after adding a piece of 9-hearted Jadebone Fragrant Wood as a material, the power of the magic treasures refined would increase by an average of 30%. From this, it could be seen how precious the 9 Hearts Jadebone Fragrant Shade Wood was. But compared to the 9-hearted Jadebone Spirit Mending Grass, the fragrant shade wood was no different from rubbish. The 9-hearted Jadebone Spirit Mending Grass had to grow as a parasite on the fragrant shade wood. It was a 4th-grade spirit herb, and the pills concocted from it could only be enjoyed by gold immortals. A Jin Dan concocted from the Spirit Mending Grass could instantly replenish all the immortal energy of a gold immortal who had exhausted all his energy. On top of that, his body would always be full of immortal energy for a month, and no matter how many powerful immortal spells he used, his immortal energy would never be depleted. If a gold immortal were to fight with his life, and one had consumed the Jin Dan concocted from the Spirit Mending Grass and could unleash a powerful immortal spell at any time, while the other had his immortal energy gradually depleted, it was easy to tell who would win. Among the immortals at the level of gold immortal, the value of the 9-hearted Jadebone Spirit Mending Grass had reached a sky-high price. Yu Zong looked at Mu Hai with a dignified expression and said with a cold grin, "With the fragrant shade wood and the Spirit Mending Grass as the price, you sent your 2 illegitimate sons to a top-notch gold immortal to be his disciples. For this crime alone, your entire clan should be executed. Apart from that, you have also obtained many benefits from that gold immortal, such as some spirit herbs that can prolong your life, right?" Mu Hai took a few steps back while trembling. Gritting his teeth, he stared at Yu Zong and cried out darkly, "How did you know about this?" Yu Zong smiled faintly, then shook his head and said, "It's not just this. After you got in touch with that gold immortal, you took advantage of your position as the finance minister of Hai Province to collect countless spirit herbs and trade with that gold immortal. Do I still need to tell you all your misdeeds?" Mu Hai howled at the top of his voice, "Let me die knowing the truth. How did you know all these things?" Yu Zong smiled at Wu Qi, then clapped his hands. A crisp clap rang out as a troop of fierce-looking armored soldiers suddenly rushed out from a street on the east side of the square. Clad in black armors, they were the private guards of the Yu clan, escorting a large group of men and women. An old woman, tightly bound by python tendons and with a pair of steel knives around her neck, was walking at the front, escorted by 4 armored soldiers. When Mu Hai saw her, he snapped, "What's going on? Prefecture Overseer, why you really want to wipe out my entire clan?" Yu Zong smiled cruelly and said lightly, "The person who reported you is your old wife." The old woman rolled her eyes, and a fierce gleam suddenly flashed across her numb eyes. Mu Hai took a few steps back in horror and shrieked, "Impossible! I have 9 sons with Wei Hua, and we have such a deep love. How could she betray me?" Wu Qi shook his head gently. It was obvious that Yu Zong's series of blows had almost driven Mu Hai to the brink of collapse. Wu Qi did not know how old Mu Hai was, but judging from his cultivation base, he was at least hundreds of years old. How could he accept that his wife of hundreds of years, the person who had shared the same bed with him all his life, was the one who had betrayed him and reported him? Then, he glanced at the many retinues standing behind Yu Zong. In order to help Yu Zong take control of Hai Province quickly, Yu Huai had sent a large number of trusted aides to follow Yu Zong. Some of them were skilled in military formations, some in government affairs, and some in agriculture, forestry, animal husbandry, and fishing. There must be some among them who were good at spies and secret agents. Otherwise, how could Mu Hai and his old wife have fallen out like this? Obviously, the Yu clan's control over Hai Province had begun a long time ago. Mu Hai's eyes were bloodshot. He gave Yu Miao a death stare, then turned to look at his old wife. "Wei Hua, tell me, why did you do this?" he asked in a gentle voice, sighing. "What good will it do you to report me?" Mu Hai's old wife gave a strange laugh. Suddenly, she began to struggle violently. She was so strong that it took 4 armored soldiers a great deal of effort to hold her down. "Why did you do this?" she roared at the top of her voice. "You old fool! How could you give birth to a child with those bitches outside? You've gained so many benefits, but how much did you give to your children? Why are they benefiting the bastards born by those bitches?" The only thing that could be heard in the vast square was the old lady's shrill howl. Many officials of Hai Province knelt on the ground, trembling with fear, their heads bowed deeply. No one dared to look up. Wu Qi shook his head. It was because of jealousy that this old lady came out and told on her husband. But what were the consequences of her reporting? Mu Hai was ordered to be executed, and her entire clan was sent here. Was Yu Zong going to treat them to a meal? With a faint smile on his face, Wu Qi said, "What a jealous woman! What a pity for Mu Hai's entire clan." Yu Zong burst out laughing. Arching his brows, he ordered, "Execute the traitor, Mu Hai, and his entire clan." "Do you have ordered them to be executed?" Mu Hai roared. At the same time, the armored soldiers raised their steel blades, which tore through the air and landed heavily on the necks of Mu Hai's clan members. More than 2,000 heads flew into the air, and blood splattered all over the ground. Mu Hai's wife and children, as well as his collateral clan members, servants and maidservants, and even members of some minor clans who were related by marriage to his collateral clan members, a total of more than 2,000 people were killed. The head of Mu Hai's old wife flew into the air along with the blood, spinning 3 times in the air while still staring fixedly at Mu Hai. Vaguely, he could hear a few vague words coming out of the old lady's mouth. "Old fogey, even when I'm dead. I won't let you go." The strong sense of jealousy in her voice made Wu Qi's body shiver. "Fortunately, my Zhang Lu is a good girl. She was even planning to find me a concubine." Compared to Mu Hai's old wife, Wu Qi suddenly felt a great sense of relief. The corners of Mu Hai's eyes suddenly exploded when he saw his clan members being slaughtered before his eyes, and 2 streams of blood trickled down his cheeks. Without making a sound, he threw his head back, opened his mouth, and let out a soundless howl. Then he spun around, and the jade finger glove on his left little finger shot toward Yu Zong's heart in a beam of green light. The mysterious runes on the finger glove flickered rapidly, and when it was about to reach Yuhi's heart, the finger glove had already transformed into a 1-foot-long green viper. Wu Qi gave a cold snort as he stepped in front of Yuhi and let the little viper slam into him with a beam of green light. A deafening boom rang out like the ringing of a bronze bell. The viper was shattered, and countless jade powder drifted away from Wu Qi's chest. Wu Qi felt a soreness in his chest, and a great force made his body sway. A tingling sensation rushed up his throat, and he nearly coughed up a mouthful of blood. He forcibly suppressed the mouthful of blood, then curled his lips into a smile at Mu Hai, who was dumbfounded. Impossible. This is the 1,000 snakes heart-devouring, all crafted by a gold immortal for me. Anyone below the realm of gold immortal will die instantly. How could you be fine? Mu Hai stared at Wu Qi in astonishment, his body shivering like a sieve. A look of despair came over his face, and a heavy aura of death emanated from him. Wu Qi did not answer Mu Hai's boring question. Instead, he lightly patted his chest and flicked the jade powder far away. When the two heavily armored soldiers behind him saw a place where they could take advantage of the situation, they shouted in unison, "Die, you traitor!" Then, they drew their swords and charged toward Mu Hai. Sword lights flashed, and in the blink of an eye, their swords had reached Mu Hai's neck. Suddenly, Mu Hai let out a strange laugh. He raised both hands up, and countless hair-thin thorns shot out of his sleeves along with dense black smoke. Caught unprepared, the two soldiers were hit by the black smoke. Sharp and unpleasant ghost howls came from within the black smoke. The souls of the two armored warriors trembled, and were pulled out of their bodies by the black smoke. Their bodies that had lost their souls became extremely weak, and the thorns easily pierced through their bodies, turning them into sieves. Mu Hai laughed sinisterly. "You've killed my entire clan. Today, all of you will be buried with my people." Laughing, Mu Hai was about to exercise a mystic fiend technique when Wu Qi's body suddenly swayed and he charged forward. Shen energy sprayed out of his body and transformed into a dozen or so figures of Wu Qi around Mu Hai. Taking advantage of the time when Mu Hai was dodging in horror, Wu Qi punched him in the head with all his might. Mu Hai, who was only a 4-moon oracle, howled miserably as his head burst open and he died on the spot. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.